I had just finished a 24-hour shift, my hands still smelling of disinfectant and the sweat of people I'd helped keep alive. When I got home, all I wanted was to open the fridge for a little milk, but my daughter-in-law leaned in to block me, her eyes colder than an ER at 3 a.m. "Don't open the wrong one. This fridge is mine." She slapped a bright red label right onto my milk carton. "Crystal, do not touch." Behind her, Tyler, the son I raised on cup noodles during night shifts, murmured, "Mom, from now on, please buy your own stuff." I froze. The two people I loved most now spoke to me like I was a stranger. My daughter-in-law turned away, her voice light as ice water on my heart. "Next month, you should find a place that fits your age. We need quiet." The house I bought with countless overnight shifts suddenly felt foreign. I didn't cry, didn't argue. I just felt something drop and shatter inside my chest. I went to my room, locked the door, and opened the safe deed to the house. Savings book, provisional will, all intact. I smiled faintly. They think I'm weak? Fine. In a few weeks she'll be begging me to open that fridge door, and when that day comes, I'll be the only one holding the key to this house. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Marion Blake, 67, an emergency nurse with over 40 years at St. Mary's Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. I've watched people wrestle with life and death and learned to stay calm inside chaos. But I never imagined the worst pain wouldn't come from the ER. It would come from my own kitchen. I used to believe that after my husband died in a construction accident, every sacrifice was worth it. Tyler, the skinny asthmatic boy, grew up and had a family of his own. I just wanted to help them start smooth, share my roof so they could save and build a dream. But now, that very home is where I'm being pushed out. I went to my room, took off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The oak floor still smelled clean, but inside I was ice cold. I pulled out my phone and took photos, the red label on the milk, on the butter, even on an orange in the fridge. "Crystal, do not touch," slanted, messy letters, as if she were marking territory. I saved everything, not for revenge, but because my gut told me I'd need proof. From the kitchen I heard Crystal, "Marion, next time remember to buy your own. People pay for what they use." "No, Mom, no. Mrs. Blake, just Marion, bare and empty, like I was a renter." I answered quietly, "All right." My reply was soft as a breath, but inside, something was shifting, slow, steady, and burning. That night, I sat on my bed remembering 20 years ago, holding feverish Tyler in my arms through a brutal asthma attack, running through rain to borrow money for medicine, living on instant noodles for 3 months to make payments on this little house, the house that now holds both the couple and my humiliation. I used to think my son's happiness was enough. But is a mother's love meant to be trampled like this? Around 8 o'clock, Crystal called from the living room. "Mom, I'm making steak tonight. Oh, and I'm thinking of selling your SUV, okay? The cash can help us go to Miami next month." I stepped out and saw her in the warm light, stirring the pan like she'd said something ordinary. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, went back to the office, locked the door, opened the safe, and checked every paper. The deed was in my name, savings, retirement accounts, provisional will, everything intact. I closed the safe, the metal click like a silent promise. From now on, no one touches what I built. At dinner, Crystal set the table and called Tyler down. I sat quietly, listening to them talk about trips and lavish plans, as if money fell from the sky. Tyler glanced at me and said softly, "Mom, Crystal and I are trying to create some privacy. Maybe you should consider renting. Somewhere quieter and more comfortable for your age." "Privacy?" I repeated, my voice sounding like someone else's. He avoided my eyes and looked to Crystal. She gave a triumphant smile, speared the steak, and chewed slowly, like she'd just wrapped a perfect surgery. After dinner, I washed dishes in silence. Hot water ran over my cracked hands, and I thought about how many times these hands had held the dying and told them, "You're going to be okay." Tonight, I needed those words more than anyone. Night fell. The house went still. I lay listening to the wind against the window. Then a small sound made me open my eyes, the rip of tape. I stepped softly into the hallway and peeked into the kitchen. Crystal was peeling old labels and sticking new ones onto pots, pans, and plates. Each ash-K of tape felt like it sliced my skin. I went back to my room, sat at the desk, and opened a small notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Journal starting today. Everything they say and do, I'll record." Not for revenge, but to protect the truth. I texted Nora Patel, my longtime nurse friend. "Nora, can you swap shifts next week? I need 2 days free for family matters." Nora replied almost at once. "Of course, Marian, are you okay?" I stared at the message, pressed my lips together. Not yet, but soon. Before sleep, I opened the closet and took out one of Tyler's old shirts, the tiny superhero tee I'd saved from when he was 8. I pressed it to my chest. Tears welled but didn't fall. "Son, I've protected you all your life," I whispered. "Maybe it's time I protect myself." The nightlight cast a soft gold on the wall. Outside, the wind hissed through the oaks. I checked the clock. The hour hand had just touched midnight. In that moment, I could see the road I'd take. Silence tonight, reasoned counterattack tomorrow. I spoke to myself like a vow. Silence tonight is the lever for tomorrow. Then I turned off the spancer. Light and lay down, my hands still smelling of disinfectant, my heart heavy. But in the middle of that pain, a small flame flickered, weak but stubborn. If I've survived hundreds of life or death shifts, I'll survive this house. The next morning, Texas sunlight slanted across the kitchen window. I started toward the bathroom to wash my hair and stopped. On the shampoo bottle I'd used for years was a small pink strip of tape, neat marker letters, "Crystal, do not share." I looked at the towel shelf. Paper towels and laundry detergent had the same labels. Even the hand soap pump was wrapped with a note stamped "Owned." Crystal stood in the kitchen, hair in a bun, coffee in hand, smiling thinly. "I just want to avoid confusion, you know. Everyone pays for what they use seems fair." I looked around my house, the sink, the cabinets, the bathroom shelf. Everything felt tagged like a claimed territory. The only thing missing was her name stuck onto the air I was breathing. I didn't respond. I poured a glass of water, drank it down, and went straight out to the yard. Morning light wasn't enough to chase the chill inside me. Tyler sat at the table, sipping coffee from the machine I bought last year. The one Crystal once said was, "For guests only." Now it had a red label stuck to its side. "Crystal, owned." I looked at my son, hoping he'd see something wrong. Tyler just shrugged, detached as if watching clouds. "I think you're overreacting, Mom," he said, sounding tired. "They're just labels. Not a big deal." I set my cup down, the ceramic tapping softly on wood. "Tyler," I asked slowly, "since when do I need permission to use my own things in my own home?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Crystal just wants clarity. You know how she is organized, likes everything neat." I smiled the smile of someone who already sees the crack in the wall. "Organized?" I said. "You're right, but sometimes people label things to own them, not to tidy them." Tyler went quiet. I turned away and said nothing more. At noon, when Crystal left for work, I gathered the kitchen trash to take outside. When I lifted the lid, I froze. Inside was the bag of groceries I'd bought yesterday. Milk, eggs, produce everything unopened, tossed in whole. On the bag, in thick black marker, expired unsafe. I checked the milk. The date was a week out. Lettuce still green, eggs uncracked, not expired, intentionally discarded. I took a deep breath and snapped photos of everything. What I felt wasn't pain anymore, it was cold. Cold like an early morning OR when they prep to cut, except this time, the thing being cut out of a life was me. That afternoon, I took a small USB drive thin as a coin and buried it in the flour jar on the kitchen shelf. It held all my photos, recordings, and receipts, every piece of proof of the labels they'd stuck on my life. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it, but I knew this. If the truth ever got twisted, that USB would speak for me. Toward evening, as I started dinner, Crystal clicked in from the door, her heels crisp on the wood. "Marion," she said loudly, "we need to be clear. Whoever pays decides. You get that, right? I work all day. I can't cover everything." I turned and looked straight at her. "So tell me who's been paying the electric, water, and internet for the last 3 months." She frowned but kept the sugary tone. "You're forgetting we all live together." I only smiled. Not because it was funny, because I'd heard the confidence of someone who doesn't know where she's standing. After she went upstairs, I opened a drawer and pulled out the stack of bills. Power, water, internet, every one, in the name of Marion Blake. I started counting. Nearly $420 a month, 3 months straight, all from my account. I wrote the totals in my notebook and drew a red line under, "Who's the real payer?" That night, taking trash out, I ran into Mrs. Gutierrez, my next-door neighbor of over 10 years. She was watering her roses, looked up at me with a careful sympathy. "Marion," she said softly, "I don't want to meddle, but I heard Crystal telling someone she's moving you into senior living because it's cleaner and easier to manage." I stood still, my hand tightening on the trash bag. "She actually said that?" She nodded, a little hesitant. "I thought you should know. Young people forget we still have the right to decide." I thanked her, tried to smile, but my chest felt as hollow as the trash bag I'd just dropped. That night I sat by the window, street light leaking through the thin curtains. Tyler and Crystal were asleep, but her perfume lingered in the house, cold and cloying, like something fake. I scrolled back to an old message from Nora Patel. "Marion, you should meet my friend attorney Avery Chen. She handles homeowner rights and unlawful occupancy." I typed quickly, "Avery, this is Marion Blake, a friend of Nora Patel's. I need to meet about a matter involving property and homeownership rights." After I hit send, I stared at the screen for a long moment, not because I hesitated, but because I knew the real game was starting now. Near midnight, I turned on the living room light. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock tick. I knelt, pulled back the small rug under the coffee table, and lifted the floorboard section I'd built years ago for important papers. Beneath was a hidden compartment, wrapped tight in plastic. I took every original house deed, insurance, bank books, and put them inside. I left only copies and harmless papers in the safe. I closed the hatch and slid the rug back. The wood's dry click was firm and final. Sitting up, I looked around the room, every corner, every bulb, every item still mine, even if someone else was trying to stick their name on every spoon. I exhaled slowly and whispered to myself, "You want to seize? I'll show you how soft takeover turns into a hard counter." Outside, the night wind rattled the oaks, leaves tapping the window like a warning. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I've lived through 4 decades of ambulance sirens, watched life slip through my fingers, and still stood up. A woman like me, who has handed breath back to so many, won't be shoved out of her own home by a few labels. I turned off the light and walked back to my room, strangely calm. Tomorrow, I'll meet Avery Chen. Tonight, I'll write 1 sentence in my notebook to remember. When someone slaps "do not touch" on my things, they've just touched the last limit of my patience. I closed the notebook, set down the pen, and smiled. Outside, it was still dark, but I knew morning would come, and this time, the light would lean my way. The next morning, the house was pin-drop quiet. Crystal left early. Tyler was still asleep. I took the chance to tidy the living room, a habit I kept, even though no one thanked me for it anymore. Sunlight slipped through the curtains onto the coffee table where Tyler had left his laptop and a mess of papers I was only going to dust, but when I pulled the drawer, a small catch sound stopped me. Something was jammed. I tilted my head and pulled harder. The drawer slid halfway out, revealing a bundle of papers stuffed in fast. On top was a stack of receipts from hotels, restaurants, and fashion boutiques in Austin and Dallas. The amounts: $620, $980, even $2,300 at a jewelry store. All under the name Tyler Blake, signed by him. My heart pounded. Tyler's pay couldn't cover this. I sat down and carefully sorted each sheet. In the pile, I found a handwritten loan note on yellowing paper with both our signatures. Tyler Blake borrows $35,000 from Marion Blake to open and firefight auto garage. Repayment term: 24 months, starting June 2022. The corner still showed the ballpoint dent from the day I signed, my hand trembling with emotion. I remembered it clearly: Tyler's birthday, his hug, "I'll make you proud, Mom." I'd cashed out part of my retirement early to help him. 2 years later, the garage never opened, and the money never returned. I clenched the paper, then smoothed it flat on the table. Right beneath it, a glossy flyer for a luxury downtown condo with a red circle around: "Deposit once Mom's house is sold." I stared at that line, the room's air thinning. Next to it, a printed text thread. Crystal must have printed it to strategize with Tyler. "Crystal, don't push too hard. Let her feel cramped and then transfer. The more she fights, the more alert she gets." Tyler: "I know, but she seems suspicious. Crystal, leave it to me. An old nurse won't hold a house when no one needs her." I put a hand to my chest to steady my breath. Every word felt like a cold blade. I read them again, hoping I was wrong, but no, my son had planned with his wife how to edge his own mother out of her house. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Noon light bleached everything out. In my head, one small voice: "Don't lose your composure, Marion. Don't let them see you break." I took my phone, photographed every page, every line. Then I put everything back exactly as it was, careful as if I'd never touched it. Before closing the drawer, I saw an unsealed white envelope in the corner. I eased it open: 2 comped dinner for 2 cards to a high-end restaurant. No need to guess who the 2 were. I stood, slid the drawer shut. My hands were cold, but strangely not shaking. The sharp pain in my chest was still there, but it didn't drag me down. It pushed me to stand upright. I walked straight onto the porch and drew a long breath. The oaks out front swayed, leaves whispering, sun dappling. The steps. I remembered the day Tyler moved in with Crystal. They said they wanted to help me feel less lonely, that my house was too big, wasted on one person. I believed them. I opened my door, my heart, and my bank account. And now, the very people I welcomed in want to shut the door on me. Around midday, I called attorney Avery Chen, the one Nora had mentioned. Her voice over the phone was light but firm, the calm of someone familiar with family property fights. "Mrs. Blake," Avery said, "the most important thing now is to stay calm and keep your evidence safe. Don't confront them. Don't say anything that tips them off. I've photographed everything," I said. "Texts, receipts, the loan note. Good. Back it up in multiple places. If you can, send me copies via secure email. We'll meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. in my office." Her voice steadied me. "Avery," I said softly, "they're my son and daughter-in-law. I don't want to destroy their lives." "Mrs. Blake," she paused. "Sometimes protecting yourself isn't revenge, it's stopping people from doing worse. Especially when they're using your trust as a tool." I was quiet a moment. "You're right," I said. "Thank you, Avery. I'll be there." That afternoon, I pulled out my old notebook and opened to the first blank page. On the faint lines, I wrote small but firm, "Soft takeover plan begin." Below it, I listed bullet points. 1. Fridge labels to seize use. 2. Food discarded to make me feel I don't belong. 3. Money personal spending, old debt unpaid. 4. Language Marion instead of mom. 5. Goal pressure me to voluntarily leave. I stared at those lines a long time. Crystal's face flashed in my mind, leaning against the fridge, lipstick dark, eyes contemptuous. Maybe she thinks I'm a frail old woman, easy to steer like a patient to be neatly placed in assisted living. She was wrong. I'm the one who has held on to people's lives, steady-handed and blood-soaked, and still made decisions. If I survive that, I'll survive her little game. That evening, Crystal came home late. I heard her heels on the floor, the light laugh while she called someone. Yeah, next week. He said he'll hold the unit if we close fast. I stood in my room listening and struggling to believe it. That condo, exactly the one from the flyer with the red circle. I didn't confront her. I recorded the call quietly, then set my phone down. As she went upstairs, I pulled the USB from the flower jar, backed up all the new photos and audio, and tucked it back. I heard her laughing with Tyler in their room, the laugh of someone who thinks she's already won. What they didn't know was the real fight hadn't even started. Late that night, I sat on my bed with a mug of mint tea. I looked at my hands, the ones that had held surgical tools, and steadied so many lives now trembling because of my own son. I took a deep breath and smiled slightly. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew I still had strength to push back. I picked up my phone and texted Avery. I have clear evidence. I'll come in tomorrow morning, she replied briefly. Good. Don't let them know you've contacted me. Get some sleep, Mrs. Blake. Tomorrow will be long. I set the phone down and looked around the quiet room. Outside, the night wind gently moved the curtain. I touched my notebook, where the words, "soft takeover plan," were still fresh. My heart still ached, but my hands had stopped shaking. I turned on the small lamp and wrote one last line. Tomorrow morning, meet Avery Chen, 9 a.m. This will be the starting point. I closed the notebook, set it by my pillow, and lay down. The clock ticked steadily. Inside me, nothing felt chaotic anymore, only a steady silence. They think I'm just a gentle old woman, easy to shoo away like an old knick-knack, but they'll soon learn that. Inside me is still a nurse who has fought death and has never lost. I closed my eyes and let the darkness hold me. Tomorrow, everything begins. And this time, I'm the one in control. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Texas sunlight slipped through the curtain, pale as old paper. I made myself a cup of black coffee, drank it in silence, then chose the brown coat my husband used to love, the one thing that steadied me in chaos. Today I would meet Avery Chen, the person Nora said, will help you see your boundaries again. I arrived at the office just before 9 a.m. A small sign read, Avery Chen, attorney at law, property and family rights. No luxury, just a neat room scented with strong coffee and shelves packed with volumes of the Texas statutes. The smell of paper, ink, and coffee blended together, and it felt like stepping into an operating room where you don't save bodies, you save dignity. Avery greeted me with a slight smile. She looked in her early 40s, black hair tied back, silver-rimmed glasses. Her voice was low and clear. Please have a seat, Mrs. Blake. Nora filled me in briefly. Start from the beginning, every detail matters. I took a deep breath and opened the file bag I'd prepared all night. I laid each item on the desk in order. Photos of labels on food, shampoo, the coffee machine, shots of my groceries thrown in the trash. A copy of the loan agreement for $35,000 signed by Tyler. A luxury condo flyer, with deposit once Mom's house is sold circled. A printout of messages between the two of them about making Mom feel cramped so she'll transfer. And finally, a 3-month household cost summary, all paid from my account. Avery stayed quiet while I talked, jotting notes now and then. When I got to the messages, my voice caught, but she didn't interrupt, she just nudged a tissue box toward me. When I finished, she leaned back and laced her fingers. "Mrs. Blake," she said slowly. "Legally, they're occupants at will, staying without a lease or ownership. That means you can terminate their stay at any time, as long as we follow Texas notice requirements." I looked at her, holding on to every word. "So, I can ask them to leave?" Avery nodded. "Completely lawful. And we'll do it by the book. First, a notice to vacate giving the required time to leave. At the same time, we can demand repayment of the $35,000 plus interest and consider emotional distress damages if they escalate." I touched the edge of the desk, feeling blood moving stronger in my veins. For the first time in months, I heard words that made me believe I wasn't powerless. Avery leaned in, softer. "However, I want one more approach, a psychological one. Instead of pushing them straight into a fight, we'll make them see the consequences if they keep going. I can show them the civil and tax risks so they understand that the sell mom's house scheme isn't just unethical, it could be a chargeable offense." I smiled slightly. "You plan to scare them?" Avery answered calmly. "Not scare, Mrs. Blake. Just put the truth in daylight and let them fear themselves." I sat still, listening to each word. Most of my life I've been an observer of patients, people, pain. I knew she was right. Sometimes people don't stop out of kindness. They stop because they fear the cost. After we covered the details, Avery set a pre-printed packet in front of me. "This is the authorization so I can act on your behalf. The file opening fee is $1,500. You can pay now or by transfer." I took out my checkbook, wrote quickly, and signed. When I set the pen down, my hand was steady, a rare feeling since my husband died. Avery watched me for a moment, then said, "I need you to keep all documents confidential. Don't let them suspect you've hired counsel. If they find out, they could move assets or destroy evidence." I nodded. "I understand. I've backed everything up to a USB and sent copies to my friend, Nora Patel." Avery gave a brief smile. "Good. You're a step ahead of me. But please be careful. Cornered people do reckless things." Her voice turned grave. "And remember, never argue alone. If they get heated, leave the room. Let me handle all legal communication." I met her eyes. There was a rare kind of understanding there. I knew it wasn't just professional advice, it was a reminder from one woman to another who'd been underestimated. By the time I left, the sun was overhead. The breeze carried the smell of coffee from a nearby cafe. I stood at the door for a beat and looked up at the pale blue sky. Something in my chest felt lighter, as if half the weight had been lifted. On the way home, I stopped at a small gas station. While the tank filled, I caught my reflection in the mirror, a silver-haired woman with deep lines around her eyes but a gaze clearer than ever. I realized I was getting myself back. I drove slowly through the suburbs, under rows of oak trees. Each house I passed reminded me of little families, dinner laughter, baking smells. My house, the one I used to call a nest, now felt like a quiet battlefield. But this time, I wouldn't walk in like someone being pushed out. I'd walk in as the rightful owner. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Crystal through the window on the phone, her face tight in the sunlight. I couldn't hear her, but from her lips I could guess the familiar words, "Sell the house." I walked in calmly and gave a short greeting. "Good afternoon." She turned, forced a smile. "Where were you?" "I thought you had a morning shift." "I took the day," I said evenly. "Had a few things to handle." She watched me, suspicion flickering. I only smiled and went straight upstairs. In my room, I opened my notebook to a new page. The first line I wrote, "Justice begins with a single word, courage. I sat there for a long time, looking at my handwriting. Outside, traffic hummed far off, but inside, everything was peaceful. It had been a long time since I felt this, not the peace of resignation, but the peace of someone preparing a counterstrike. I sent Nora a short text. "Nora, if anything happens, you're the second keeper of the files, okay?" She replied almost instantly, "Count on it. I'm here, Marion." I set the phone down and leaned back in the chair. The scent of coffee lingered on my coat, reminding me of the morning at Avery's where for the first time in months I felt heard. By late afternoon, the sunset washed the window rose gold. I stepped onto the porch and sat in my husband's old rocker. In the quiet air, I heard wind in the leaves and kids playing ball next door. I sipped tea, warmth spreading slowly through me. Tomorrow, Avery would start drafting the eviction notice. I knew the road wouldn't be easy, but at least I'd taken the first steps on my own feet. No more crying in silence. No more waiting for rescue. I smiled, the first true smile in weeks of humiliation, because I finally understood something simple that took a lifetime to learn. No one protects me better than I do. That evening, rain came out of nowhere. First storm of May speckling the yard, streetlights shimmering on wet concrete. I was about to make tea when I heard a car at the gate. A shiny black SUV stopped at the curb. The doors opened, and I saw Crystal's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hanson, step out, dignified, dressed like they were heading to a board meeting. Crystal followed, arm draped loosely around Tyler's shoulder, voice sweet as syrup. "Mom, my parents want to stop by for a quick talk tonight. I checked the clock, 7:48 p.m. No appointment, no heads up." I only nodded slightly. "All right," I said. "Come in." Mrs. Hanson smiled politely, eyes sweeping the living room like she was inspecting a property to purchase. Mr. Hanson, tall, silver hair cut neat, sat down and spoke right away. "Marion, we're not here to judge. We're here to talk like adults." I poured tea and handed cups around. "I also prefer straightforward conversations," I said evenly. Crystal sat close to Tyler, fingers interlaced, eyes glinting with calculation. I knew she'd prepped a script. "Marion, Mrs. Hanson began, "we know living with young people can be hard, especially across generations. But maybe you should consider a more comfortable option." She paused for a sip, then smiled. "A high-end assisted living community. Nurses, doctors, attentive caregivers. Very good for seniors' health." I kept quiet, looking at each of them. "What about this house?" I asked slowly. Crystal jumped in, like she'd been waiting. "Tyler and I will stay. We can manage it, maintenance, upkeep, keeping things tidy. You won't have to worry about anything, just rest." "Who pays for maintenance, taxes, insurance?" I asked softly, almost a whisper. No one answered. Tyler's eyes slid straight to Crystal. Mrs. Hanson dabbed her forehead with a tissue. Mr. Hanson gave a polite little cough. "Let the kids handle that," Crystal cut in. "You know those costs aren't much. What matters is your peace and having care." I smiled lightly. "Peace?" I repeated. "Yes, I like peace too." I stood to refill the teapot. As I did, I subtly pressed the record button on my smartwatch, the one I wear on shifts. I kept my voice even, deliberately clearer. "So, what you're suggesting is that I move out of this house into assisted living, and you two stay to manage it? Did I hear that right?" The room stalled a beat. Crystal pressed her lips together. "Mrs." Hanson tilted her head, voice sweet as sugar with poison under it. "Marion, no one's forcing you. We only want what's best. At your age, taking care of yourself is the priority." That line kept ringing in my head, colder than the rain outside. Have you ever heard someone say, "It's for your own good," when what they really wanted was something that belongs to you? Share how that felt in the comments. I truly want to know what you think when you hear those words. I nodded, poured everyone more tea, and said slowly, "Thank you. I'll consider it." Those 3 words softened the room. Crystal looked relieved, like she thought I was giving in. Tyler stayed silent, wringing his hands. Each time he seemed about to speak, he stopped every time I looked at him. His eyes dropped. "Mister." Hanson braced his hands on his knees, keeping it courteous. "You know, my daughter only wants to help. She worries you're lonely and tired. Assisted living is modern now. There's a pool, gardens. You'll like it." I smiled. "I'm sure. But the question is who truly cares about my health?" No one answered. Only the wall clock ticked through the thick air. I looked at each face and saw the cracks forming in their patience. Finally, I stood and set the teapot down gently. "It's late. Thank you for coming by. I'll think about your suggestion." They stood, gathered their bags, still speaking politely. But when Crystal reached the door, I saw her eyes cold, sharp like someone who just placed a chess piece perfectly. When the door closed, the house fell quiet. Only the rain on the porch faded. I walked into the kitchen and looked around. The red labels still clung to pan lids, spice jars, the coffee machine. I stood still for a moment, then raised my hand and peeled them off. 1, 2, 3. Paper tore softly in the hush. I took them all fridge to shelves, erasing every trace of that soft takeover they'd staged. When I pulled the last one from the stainless soup pot, a strange feeling spread through my chest. Not anger, not joy, a return taking back what was already mine. I scooped the labels into a small trash bag, tied it tight, and tossed it out. The rain was still light, the wind cool, but a small, steady flame burned inside me. Back at the table, I picked up my phone. Avery had texted, "Notary has an opening Saturday morning, 10 a.m. I reserved it if you agree." I replied, "I'll be there." And I recorded tonight's conversation. Seconds later, Avery wrote, "Good, don't delete anything. The more they talk, the better for us." I put the phone away and looked around the kitchen again. No more red labels. No more Crystal, do not touch. Everything looked the same, clean, quiet, but felt completely different, reclaimed. The stove clock flicked to 11:59 p.m. The house slept. I walked to the new fridge, the one Crystal called hers, and set my hand on the gleaming door. I opened it, checked each shelf, then turned the tiny key hidden in my sleeve and locked it. The dry little click was soft but enough to make me smile. The closed door reflected me back, a woman once humiliated in her own kitchen, now standing straight, calm, with the key in her hand. I took my notebook and wrote the last line of the day. "They want to talk like adults. Fine. From now on, I'll act like an adult who knows the law, knows boundaries, and knows when to lock the door." I set the pen down and listened to the wind at the window. Down the hall, Tyler shifted in his sleep, and Crystal was probably dreaming of a luxury condo that doesn't exist. They didn't know the game had changed sides. And tonight, the person truly in control was me. I turned off the kitchen light and walked slowly to my room. The rain kept falling, even and gentle. In the dark, I felt the quiet of a first small victory, not over them, but over my own fear. Saturday morning, I'll meet the notary and begin the legal leg of this journey. Tonight, I'll allow myself one luxury I haven't dared in a long time, a good night's sleep. 3 days after the family meeting, Nora called me. Her voice was a mix of urgency and firmness. "Marion, I spoke with a friend, a forensic accountant who used to work for the IRS. Send him the account screenshots you copied from Tyler's computer. He'll review them carefully and keep you anonymous." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep this at a civil level. But the other part, the one that had watched my son change and been humiliated in my own kitchen, knew it was time to learn the truth, however dirty. I sent the files through the secure email Avery set up. 3 days later, the report came back. I opened it and read slowly, line by line. In Tyler's transactions, there were repeating deposits from a source called Sable Consulting Agency, exactly 14 days apart, each for $2,800. The accountant wrote briefly, "This agency does not exist in the tax database, likely a shell entity issuing fake invoices for money laundering or tax evasion. If audited, the recipient is directly liable." I sat still. The room seemed to shrink, the air heavy with my son's guilt. I read it again, hoping my eyes were wrong, but no, the numbers were real, cold, and unforgivable. I leaned back, hands over my face, anger and pity tangled in my throat. I'd sacrificed my life so Tyler wouldn't grow up in scarcity, and now he'd stepped into a dangerous gray zone for ambition. I called Avery. She picked up right away, calm. "Mrs. Blake, I've reviewed the report Nora sent. If accurate, Tyler could be implicated in tax fraud. Penalties can be severe, even criminal if the IRS opens a case." I swallowed. "I don't want my son to go to prison." Avery paused for a few seconds, then spoke gently. "I understand. We won't use this to harm, but to persuade. This will be our strategic lever to show them that if they insist, they risk not only the house, but their freedom." I stayed silent. It took me nearly a full minute. Before I could answer, "Okay, do it your way." That night, I spread every document across the table: photos, receipts, messages, a copy of the loan agreement, the financial report. Each sheet was a small shard of truth fit together. They formed a picture of greed. I opened my notebook and marked the timeline. February, they started sticking labels: "Crystal, do not touch." March, the food I bought was thrown out. April, Crystal told Tyler to let Mom feel cramped so she'll transfer. May, the Hansen family came to push me into assisted living. Now, the discovery of illegal money flows. I named this file set the Truth Dossier. Dry title maybe, but to me it was an oath. I printed 3 sets, one for me, one for Avery, one for Nora. Each packet was clipped with the list of audio files, photos, and receipts. When the printer stopped, I slipped each set into a plastic folder, labeled by hand, my hands barely trembling, and steadying as I went. Paper wasn't just evidence, it was the line between me and injustice. Night fell, and the house was so quiet I could hear wind seeping through the door jamb. I sat in the living room. The warm lamp threw my shadow long across the wall. Suddenly, an argument erupted upstairs. Crystal's voice was sharp and high. "Don't you get it? I can't live like this forever. If this doesn't get done, I'm gone, Tyler." Tyler sounded worn out, almost pleading. "Crystal, keep it down. Mom can hear us." "So what if she hears? She'll be out of here soon. I'm not waiting." I sat still, listening, my hand resting on my teacup. Every word thudded down to the first floor, one blow after another, but I didn't feel a stab anymore. Just a quiet, clean hurt like a wound that's closed. I remembered when Tyler was little how he'd cling to my legs, begging, "Mom, when I grow up, you'll never have to work again. I'll take care of you." And now he was discussing how to push me out. Life can be cruel enough that your own love becomes a weapon against you. I sighed, stood, and set the cup on the table. No tears, no resentment. Only cold clarity, like a doctor reading a late-stage cancer report. Not curable, only removable. I walked to my office, turned on the computer, and opened the folder titled Notice Day. Avery had already sent the forms for signature notice to vacate and demand for repayment. I read every line carefully, checking each clause. Occupant is present without a rental agreement. Owner may demand vacation of the premises within 30 days. Unpaid debts will be escalated to legal proceedings. I signed at the bottom, saved, and printed hard copies. Each time the pen touched paper, it felt like I was closing a long chapter 1 of endurance. When I finished, I folded the documents into an envelope and sealed it. On the front, in clean handwriting, I wrote, "To Avery Chen, attorney at law." I slipped the envelope into my purse along with the copy for Nora. The clock on the wall read 11:48 p.m. I looked up and heard the rain on the porch taper off. The whole city felt hushed. Streetlight glow pooling soft and yellow under the eaves. I checked the kitchen windows, locked the fridge, then stopped and looked around one more time. Everything neat and calm, but I knew it was only the quiet before the storm. Back in my room, I sat on the bed, phone in hand. Nora had texted, "The accountant confirms, if the IRS audits, Tyler could face back taxes and up to triple penalties. But if he stops now, he might avoid the worst." I finished reading and took a deep breath. Not joy, not pain, just regret. I never wanted my child punished. I just wanted him to wake up before it was too late. I set the phone down, opened my small notebook and wrote, "Love isn't the same as blindness. Some children can only be saved by letting them fall." Then I closed the notebook and set my alarm for 6:30 a.m. Tomorrow, notice day. I turned off the light, lay back, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. The clock ticked steadily. With each beat, my fear receded, making room for something else, the cool calm of someone ready. They used to think I was a soft, elderly woman. They don't know that when a mother stops crying, what comes next is action. I closed my eyes. A quiet sleep settled over me, light as mist. Tomorrow, when the alarm rings, I'll rise not with a broken heart, but with one that knows how it will live and who deserves to remain in this home. That morning, the sky was unusually clear. Early sun washed the oak trees out front. A breeze stirred little white blooms along the walk. I'd been up early, brewed a pot of ginger tea, and set it on the kitchen table. The house was so quiet I could hear the living room clock steady as my own heartbeat. At 9:30 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Avery in a gray blazer, files in hand, with a process server beside her. He nodded politely. "Mrs. Marion Blake? We're here to serve legal notice." I drew a slow breath and kept my voice even. "Come in." "I'm ready." As they stepped inside, Crystal appeared on the stairs in a blush silk robe, hair loosely pinned, lotion still on her face. Her eyes flickered at the sight of the two strangers. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound in control. Tyler came behind her in sweats, face drawn, like he hadn't slept. He looked at me, then Avery, confused like someone waking from a bad dream. I seated everyone around the table. Avery opened her case and set down a thick stack of papers, while the process server stood by, clear and firm. At the request of the property owner, Mrs. Marion Blake, I'm here to deliver a notice to vacate. Timeline, 72 hours from this moment. Additionally, this is a demand to repay the $35,000 plus interest, with a claim for emotional distress and property damage. The kitchen froze. Morning light washed across the table and straight into Crystal's widened eyes. She shot to her feet, voice shrill. "What? Betrayal? You're suing us? Did you forget who's been taking care of you all these years?" I met her gaze, steady. "No one has taken care of me, Crystal. I gave you a place to live, food, and chances. All three end today." Tyler dropped to his knees, hands braced on his thighs. His voice was hoarse and shaking. "Mom, I'm sorry. Don't do this. I didn't mean. I just wanted you to rest." I looked at my son, the man I once carried when he was sick, the knees I bandaged when he fell off his bike. Now he knelt before me not out of love but fear of losing a crutch. "Tyler," I said, light but precise, "you've had thousands of chances to tell the truth, to change, to start over. You chose to ignore them all. Don't apologize to me, apologize to yourself." He bowed his head. Tears hit the tile. Crystal slammed her hand on the table. "Enough!" She's bluffing. No court lets you throw family out like this. Avery stood, voice cool and cutting. Under Texas law, a person staying without a lease can be required to vacate within 72 hours if properly noticed. All documents here are notarized, with copies filed at the court. If you or your husband wish to contest this, we'll see you at the Bexar County hearing. Crystal went pale and stepped back. You'll regret doing this to your own son, she hissed. I stood, answering calmly. I've regretted enough, mostly that I didn't do it sooner. 15 minutes later, when Avery and the process server left, the house felt thick with silence. No one spoke. I stood by the counter holding a cold cup of tea and watched Crystal gather her phone, wallet, and any small thing she claimed was hers. Tyler came down the stairs, dazed. Mom, at least give me some time. Cut in. You have 72 hours. And if you're truly sorry, you'll use those 72 hours to sort out your life, not to beg me to withdraw the filing. The front door opened, and, unexpectedly, Crystal's parents walked in. Same polished look, same superior tone. Mr. Hanson spoke first, no greeting. Marion, what is this? Our daughter says you're threatening to throw them out. This is an abuse of power. Mrs. Hanson piled on, voice sharp. Shameful. At your age, dragging a lawyer in just to humiliate your own family. Before I could answer, Avery, who'd just turned out of the driveway, heard the commotion and came back. She stepped inside with a spare copy of the file. Her tone was calm, final. Mr. and Mrs. Hanson, I represent Mrs. Blake. If you intend to countersue, we'll see you in Bexar County Court. For now, please leave the premises. Only the lawful owner decides who may stay. Silence dropped. Mr. Hanson grabbed his wife's hand and pulled her toward the door, face flushed with anger. Crystal rushed after them, crying and saying something I couldn't make out. Tyler remained, staring at me, desperation and shame mixed in his eyes. I said nothing. I turned and walked upstairs. Each step was heavy, but strangely, not shaky. In my room, I shut the door and leaned against the wall. Below me, the noise continued, Crystal crying, Tyler soothing, suitcases thumping, car doors slamming. I closed my eyes and listened like someone replaying the film of her life and knowing the last scene was near. A moment later, quiet settled. Only the first light taps of rain on the window, like the sky wanted to wash the last dirty weeks away. I went back to the kitchen. It was neat. Empty. On the fridge door, one red label remained, Crystal, do not touch, faded, a corner curling. I stared at it for a long time. Then I reached up and peeled it off. The paper tore halfway and clung to my fingertip like it wanted to hold on to. One last shred of ownership. I crumpled it and dropped it in the trash. That was the final label. I opened the fridge. Inside were just some greens, a few water bottles, and a new carton of milk. I poured a glass, added a splash of ginger tea, and inhaled. The scent was warm and soft, nothing like the icy morning weeks ago when I'd been blocked with, "Don't open the wrong one, this fridge is mine." Now, it was mine again, as it always should have been. I sat down, hands around the cup. No more trembling, no more weight, no more bitterness. Only the full quiet of someone who reclaimed what was hers without raising her voice. Before heading upstairs, I wrote a few lines. Notice day 9:30 a.m. They left in tears. I stayed, steady. No one won, only justice was put back where it belongs. I set the pen down and looked around the house. My husband's photo still hung on the wall. The window was open a crack to let the breeze in. I spoke softly, as if to him, "I did it, Frank. Finally, this house is ours again, peaceful, clean, and free." And on the windless noon of notice day, I sat there, sipped ginger tea, listened to the rain on the porch, and knew without doubt the new chapter of my life had begun. Sunday morning, the sky was a dull gray, clouds heavy like a storm warning. I brewed mint tea and set it on the dining table, ready for what I knew would come. At exactly 10 a.m., an engine rumbled at the gate. Through the window, the familiar SUV slid up the drive. 3 figures stepped out first: Crystal in a crisp white dress, her parents behind her, and lastly, Tyler, hands shoved in his pockets, head down. The family committee, I thought, a brief smile tugging at my mouth. I opened the door. Crystal walked straight in without waiting to be asked. "We need to talk," she said, voice firm, like she'd rehearsed this. "All right," I answered lightly. "I have a few things to present, too." I led them to the expeding kitchen. Everything was laid out, a clean table with a thick file sorted by sections, each clearly numbered. On the laptop screen, Avery waited on a video call, serious, steady. Crystal took a seat with her arms crossed. Her parents flanked her like a petty tribunal. Tyler sat apart, gaze unfocused. I opened the file and spoke evenly. "First, thank you for coming. I don't intend to destroy anyone. I only want to clarify the truth, what's happened in this house." I turned the first page, the household cost sheet. For 3 months, all electricity, water, internet, and property tax came out of my personal account, I said, placing the bills in front of them. "Meanwhile, you two," I looked at Crystal and Tyler, "contributed not a single dollar, despite promising to split costs." Crystal smirked. "We were going to pay, just hadn't gotten to it." I smiled back. 3 months, Crystal. I worked in the ICU. I know exactly what not yet means. 3 months is long enough for a patient to heal or for a lie to unravel. I opened the second section, the $35,000 loan agreement, signed by Tyler. "This is the money my son borrowed 2 years ago to open a garage. No payments, no interest, not even an apology." Tyler closed his eyes. I heard a hard breath leave him. Next section, the messages and the luxury condo flyer. The line circled, "Deposit once mom's house is sold." "And this," I said, voice still even, "is proof you two plotted to sell my property while I'm alive." Mrs. Hanson shot to her feet, voice shrill. "Marion, how dare you invade my daughter's privacy? This is a family matter." Avery spoke immediately from the screen, voice like a clean blade. "Ma'am, when someone plans to sell another person's property, it isn't private, it's civil fraud. If reported, authorities can initiate a financial investigation." Mr. Hanson frowned, ready to push back, but Avery continued, calm as if reading statute. "And if we submit evidence of deposits from Sable Consulting Agency, the IRS can get involved. Then every undeclared dollar, every fake invoice, everything gets audited." The room froze. Crystal turned to Tyler and whispered, "How did she find out about that?" Tyler said nothing. Fear filled his eyes. I spoke low and steady. "Tyler, I don't want you in prison, but I won't cover for you anymore. You've gone too far, and if you don't stop, the person who saves you this time won't be me." Tyler dropped his head. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong." His voice shook, a lost child's. Crystal scraped her chair back, the legs screeching across the floor. "Enough. She just wants to humiliate us. All her life she's controlled everything. Now she's using the law to win. You call that fair?" I looked at her, cold. "It's not the law that helps me win. It's the truth that keeps me standing." Crystal barked a hard laugh. "Truth? You're a bossy old woman playing victim." I simply said, softly, "You can say anything you like, but by Tuesday, 5 p.m., this house must be empty." The sentence landed like a judge's gavel. Tyler broke down and Crystal slammed her palm on the table, flinging her wedding ring metal clinking hard on wood. "I'm not staying here another minute." Her parents stood, voices sharp. "We won't let this go. You think people will believe a tyrant old lady over our daughter? We'll take this to social media and show everyone your true face." I didn't answer. I slid my smartwatch from my pocket, tapped a small button. The red light blinked. I said slowly, This conversation is being recorded. Please continue if you'd like more evidence. The room dropped into absolute silence. Mr. Hanson, flustered, tugged his wife toward the door. Crystal glanced around, eyes darting. Tyler stayed in his chair, shoulders shaking. I looked at my son and spoke softly. Tyler, you can go with them, or you can stay, but only if you take responsibility. I'm not covering for anyone anymore. He lifted his head, eyes wet, voice tight. I don't deserve it, but I want to make it right. I nodded without adding more. I know real remorse isn't in promises, it's in what you do after you've lost everything. Avery spoke from the screen, closing out the family meeting. Reminder, you have 72 hours left to vacate the house. After that, the legal filings go to the court. Crystal stood, wiped her tears, but her voice stayed venomous. Just wait. You'll die regretting it in this empty house. I only smiled, light as a breath. No, Crystal, this house was never empty. It was just missing honesty. When the door slammed, an engine roared to life out on the street. I stood still for a few seconds, then exhaled slowly. The air in the house felt lighter, as if even the wind knew who had just left. I turned to the dining table, where the wedding ring Crystal had thrown still lay, catching a weak glint of light. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it, the last symbol of a marriage built on lies. Avery was still on the screen, a small smile on her face. You okay? I'm okay, I answered, my voice low but firm. I haven't felt this calm in a long time. Good work, Marion, Avery said. I'll keep monitoring, and remember, keep the doors locked. Don't forget Tuesday, 5 p.m. I won't forget, I said. I shut the laptop, slid the file into a drawer, and sat at the table. A breeze drifted through the doorway, carrying damp earth and a hint of mint tea. I picked up my phone and texted Avery a short line. Please leave Tyler a way out if he takes responsibility. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the sky was still overcast, but something inside me felt bright in a strange way, not the light of winning, but the light of final peace. The storm was passing, and for the first time in years, I could hear the wind moving through my house, soft, so soft, like a new breath. That night, as the window frame trembled with the breeze, I heard a car roll to a stop in the drive. I peeked through the curtain. Tyler, alone, shirt wrinkled, hair messy, eyes red. He stood at the door for a long time, hand on a small duffel, like he wasn't sure whether to knock or turn away. I opened the door before he could lift his hand. I came to apologize, he said, voice hoarse and dry, like someone who hasn't spoken in days. I stood still. The night was so quiet I could hear the insects in the yard. Where's Crystal? I asked. He looked down. She left, took my savings, left a few ugly words. He held out his phone. On the screen was Crystal's message before she vanished. I'm not living with a coward who kneels to his mommy. Stay there and suck up that old air. I glanced and pushed the phone back. Don't show me anything that makes your heart heavier. Tyler sniffed, trying to swallow a sob. I've got nothing left, Mom. But I want to start over. I know I was wrong. I need you to give me 7 days. Just 7 days to clear my head, find a job, quit drinking, then I'll go. I'll pay room money, pay back every dollar. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking to fix it. I looked at my son, the man I once carried through fevers, standing in front of me like a lost boy. In the warm porch light, I saw his hands shaking. Part fear, part alcohol withdrawal. Come in, I said slowly. But this time, I have 4 conditions. He raised his eyes, hope and fear mixed together. I brought him to the kitchen and poured us both ginger tea. First, I said, for 7 days here, not a single drop of alcohol. If you crave it, call me, or step into the yard for air, but don't hide. Second, You will send out resumes and look for work. Every expense, phone, gas, meals, you cover yourself. I won't stop you, but I won't pay. Third, you must contact a treatment center or a recovery group at least one session. Fourth, I held his gaze. Each night, you write down 3 things you did right that day. You don't have to show me. Just be honest with yourself. Tyler nodded, eyes red. I promise. I took a blank sheet and wrote the 4 conditions, then signed at the bottom. If you truly want to start over, sign it. This isn't a mom and son deal, it's an agreement between 2 adults. He signed with a shaky hand. When he set the pen down, tears fell on the paper's edge, blurring a small patch. I folded it and slipped it into a file, like laying a new foundation after a storm has torn the house apart. The next morning I was up early and found Tyler sitting on the porch, staring at the pale gray sky with a cup of black coffee in front of him. No smell of booze, just coffee and mist. "Did you send out resumes?" I asked. "I did. 2 places at building supply stores, 1 at an auto shop. They said they'll take a look." I nodded, no praise, no scolding. I set a sandwich and a glass of water on the table, breakfast for someone trying to fix himself. That evening he came home late. I heard dishes being washed, running water, light clinks, patient and quiet. I stepped into the doorway, about to speak, then didn't. I just asked, "What did you do right today?" He met my eyes and smiled a little. "I didn't drink. That's enough," I said, smiling back. Day 2 passed gently. I worked in the yard and Tyler cleaned out the garage where beer cans and dried paint once piled up. He bagged trash, scrubbed the floor, hung my late husband's old tools, lining each one neatly. In the afternoon, Mrs. Gutierrez from next door brought over a warm apple loaf. "I hear your boy is back," she said, setting it on the counter. "Good for you. Sometimes the crack is where the light gets in." I poured tea and we sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the oaks. She told me, "My son was an addict too, Marion. I once thought he was lost for good, but 4 years now sober, back at work helping others. I know you're feeling afraid to hope because you've been disappointed too much." I looked at Tyler in the backyard, bent over picking up trash, tall, alone. I don't know how far he'll go, but for the first time in months, he's quiet, and the quiet isn't hostile anymore. Mrs. Gutierrez smiled softly. Silence is the first sound of change. On the 3rd night, under the warm yellow lights, I opened Frank's keepsake box. A photo of him grinning with a saw, a stopped old watch, a few letters he wrote me when we were young. In one letter, the line he used to say, "Discipline is love in its hard form. The one who teaches a child with discipline loves that child the most." My fingers trembled. Now I understood. Some love doesn't arrive as a hug, it arrives as a boundary, as the courage to say no at the right time. I folded the letter back into the box. No tears, just warmth, like Frank standing somewhere nearby, smiling. On the 4th morning, I woke to sounds in the kitchen. Tyler was cooking eggs, wearing an old apron, face clearer than I'd seen in a long time. "You're up?" he said, sounding relieved. "I've got good news." I sat, poured tea. "What is it?" "The building supply store by the gas station called. They want to interview me this afternoon, maybe start me on a trial shift. They need someone who can fix tools and organize the warehouse. I've done it before, so they're giving me a shot." I looked at him, said nothing at first. Then I nodded and smiled. "Good. That means you can start over." Tyler's eyes brightened, lips trembling like he was trying to hold on to belief. "I know, and I won't let you down again." I stood and set my hand on his shoulder, the hand that once shook with anger now felt light. "Don't promise. Just live each day the way you wrote in that agreement. When you keep your word to yourself, you won't have to fear letting anyone down." He nodded, eyes shining. In the afternoon, as he left, I watched from the window. A breeze carried the smell of coffee from the corner shop. Sunlight slanted gold across the yard. I sat in Frank's old rocker and opened my small notebook. In the bottom corner of the last page I wrote, "When someone breaks, don't rush to bury them. They might be learning how to mend." I closed the notebook and looked toward the road, where Tyler walked with his back straight, job papers in hand. For the first time in months, his stride didn't look heavy. It looked like a man beginning again for real. Inside me, no tears, just a gentle, spreading warmth. Hope. That morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtains and laid a soft gold across the floor. I was making coffee when a motorcycle buzzed and cut off in the drive. Tyler came in with dust on his shirt, a little sun-browned, but his eyes were clear, the light I hadn't seen in years. "I got the job, Mom," he said, breathless and grinning. "The building supply store hired me full-time. Starting pay isn't much, but enough for a small room near work. I think it's time I stand on my own." I set my cup down, stunned for a few seconds. "Really? Really?" He nodded, handing me the new contract. Cheap paper, but I looked at it like a diploma from life. Tyler pulled a worn brown envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table. "I know I owe you too much, but I want to start paying you back, even if it's small." I opened it. $500, 5 crisp bills laid flat. "100 is room money for these past days," he said, "and 400 is the first repayment. And—" he pulled out a folded sheet, hands shaking as he handed it to me. "This is the repayment plan I wrote. $400 a month, increasing as I get raises. You can check anytime." I held the paper and read each clumsy, crooked line, careful and sincere. At the bottom, under repayment plan, Tyler had signed, "Your son, Tyler Blake." I looked up at him. In an instant, every image returned. The blonde little boy with a toy truck, the teenager who'd promised, "I'll take care of you," the grown man who had kneeled in tears. All of them blending into one this time, standing on his own 2 feet. I set the envelope down, stepped forward, and hugged him. He went still, then hugged back, his hands shaking not from fear, but relief. I whispered, barely loud enough for us both, "You don't have to pay it all back, Tyler. Just don't repeat it." He gave a small smile and nodded, voice rough. "I get it. But you always said grown-ups take responsibility. I'm learning to be a grown-up now." That night we cooked our first dinner together, and maybe the last under the same roof, in the true sense. I made rice. Tyler marinated chicken, the same honey-grilled chicken he loved as a boy, only now my hands are more lined and his are calloused. The smell of roasting chicken filled the kitchen, blending with the simmering pot, the chop of the knife, and the light laughter of 2 people learning to begin again. I realized that after everything, motherhood hadn't vanished. It had just needed to be cleaned of anger and fear. Over dinner, Tyler talked about the new job, organizing materials, checking orders, sometimes lifting loads. "Not as exhausting as lying every day," he said with a smile between bites. I stayed quiet, watched him eat with a steady appetite, and felt something strange rise up. Pride, sadness, and peace together. "You know," I said, "the day you were born, I thought my job was to keep you safe forever. Turns out parenting is learning to let go without letting go." Tyler looked up, eyes serious and gentle. "I think you did both, Mom." Monday morning, the air was clear after a light night rain. Tyler's friend's pickup eased into the drive. His buddy Nate, tall, lean, kind face, hopped out to help load a few small boxes. Everything Tyler owned fit into 4 boxes: clothes, some tools, an old photo of me and Frank, and the watch I gave him at 18. Watching it, I felt both ache and ease. Neighbors gathered along the porch. Mrs. Gutierrez came over with a coffee. "Moving day?" she asked. "Yep," I smiled. "He found a room near work." She watched Tyler hoist a box into the truck and nodded. "Told you. A good son comes back, but next time, he'll return as a man." I smiled, eyes stinging a little. I hope so. She patted my shoulder. No need to hope, I can see it. The way he walks today, it's not running away, it's leaving the nest. I turned to my son. Tyler stood by the tailgate, said something to Nate, then waved back. I'll call every week, he said. And I'll send the money on time. Eat a real breakfast. Mom don't just drink coffee, I joked back. And you do your laundry. There's no invisible mother at that room. We both laughed. It drifted light on the breeze, no resentment, no guilt. As the truck rolled away, I stood watching for a long time. No tears, just a gentle, warm space like the breath you release after a storm. I went inside and locked the door behind me. The house was still, but not lonely. Everything as it should be. Tidy kitchen, shining table, the scent of grilled chicken still hanging faintly. I brewed a small pot of tea, poured it into a porcelain cup, and sat by the window. On the table lay Tyler's handwritten repayment plan. I read it again and paused at the last line. I can't pay back everything I took, but I will repay with time by living right. I smiled softly, brushing a finger over his messy signature. Maybe, sometimes, growing up isn't a fancy apology. It's a smudged sheet of paper and a small envelope of honest effort. Near dusk, I watered the flowers on the porch. The last light turned the yard honey gold. A mild breeze, damp earth, and roses in the air. Traffic hummed far off, and my heart felt as calm as a still lake. Mrs. Gutierrez came by again with a basket. "For you," she said. "Banana bread I just baked, best eaten when your mind has finally settled." I took it, smiling. "You always know exactly when I need something." She sat beside me, looking at the quiet porch. Strange, isn't it? When the kids leave, the house is emptier, but the heart is lighter. I nodded, sipped tea. Because we know this time they're leaving not to run, but to find their way. She looked at me kindly. "You did the right thing not rescuing, but teaching him to rescue himself." I chuckled softly and looked up at the peach-colored sky. Frank would be proud. I finally learned to love the way he taught disciplined, but kind. When the sun slipped away, I latched the gate and went inside. Warm air, golden light. I went upstairs, changed into pajamas, and pulled the curtains. On the table, the family photo still stood: Frank, me, and Tyler at his 10th birthday, grinning over the cake. I traced the glass and whispered, "I kept the promise, Frank. Our boy is standing on his own again." I turned off the light and lay down. No doors slamming, no heavy footsteps, no sighs through the wall, just the wind threading the roofline, as steady as breath. That night, for the first time in months, I slept through. No dreams, no jolts awake. Just the rare peace of a mother who finally learned that letting go doesn't mean losing your child, it means giving him the chance to find himself. 6 months have passed since Tyler left the nest. The house that once echoed with fights now holds only the tick of the clock and the light drift of coffee each morning. I slowed down and did the things I'd put off from exhaustion, changed the curtains, repainted the kitchen, planted a row of white roses along the porch. When the wind blows, the petals flutter as if someone is whispering, "It's okay now, Marion, it's okay." In the mornings, I usually head out to the garden early, trim the dead stems, spread fresh compost, and water with the old can Frank used. Sometimes, when the sun hits the spout just right, the light refracts into a tiny rainbow. I look at it and feel weightless, a piece I hadn't touched in years. Every Sunday, Tyler comes by, right on time, like clockwork. He drives a small pickup, stops at the gate, and taps the horn twice, our little signal. Each time, I open the door, already catching the smell of fresh bread from down the street. "I brought bread from the shop near my place," he says, lifting a still warm paper bag. "Baked this morning. Which kind do you want, Mom?" "Any kind you pick," I answer. And he always smiles. Tyler has changed a lot. not just in how he looks neater, healthier, but in how he talks, how he sees people. His eyes don't dodge or shrink anymore. He's become a man who knows when to feel ashamed and when to feel proud. Each month, Tyler sends $400 to $500 steady with a short text. Picked up some extra shifts this month, sending $500. He also includes a photo of his pay stub, not to show off, but to prove to himself he's keeping his word. I never demand anything. I just save those messages, month by month, like a ledger of my son's growing up. One fall afternoon, Tyler showed up with someone. A young woman with brown hair tied back, a beige sweater, and a gentle smile. "Mom," Tyler said, "this is Lena Brooks. She works at the bakery near me. She knows I owe you a lot, and she wanted to thank the person who taught me how to grow up." Lena offered her hand, her voice soft. "I've heard a lot about you. From Tyler. I just want to say, without you, I don't think he'd be standing here." I looked at her, no heavy makeup, clear eyes. Something about her made me trust her immediately. Not because she's pretty, but because her gaze looked exactly like mine at 20, when I still believed kindness never goes out of style. Dinner that day felt unusually warm. Lena helped set the table. Tyler did the dishes. When he finished, he whispered, "She's nothing like Crystal, right, Mom?" I smiled. "Don't compare. Just remember, someone who truly loves you won't ask you to tear your mother down to prove anything." He nodded, eyes deep and steady. A week later, I got a text from Crystal. I was wrong. "I want to talk. Will Tyler forgive me?" I read it and didn't reply. I wasn't angry anymore. There was nothing left to say. I just took a screenshot and sent it to Tyler, no comment. An hour later, my son wrote back. I said thank you, but no. "Thanks for staying silent, Mom." I cried when I read that. Not out of spite, but because someone who once knelt in weakness could now stand tall without me holding him up. At the end of the month, I went to attorney Avery Chen's office to update my will. Avery smiled when she saw me. "You look different than 6 months ago." "Maybe because I've learned what's worth keeping," I said. I asked to add a clause. Establish the Frank Blake Nursing Scholarship Fund for nursing students in hardship. Avery asked, "Are you sure?" "You could leave that money to Tyler." I smiled. "I don't need to leave him assets. I want to leave him a legacy he can be proud of. If Tyler lives right, that's the most valuable inheritance." Avery nodded, her eyes shining. "Frank is smiling somewhere, I'm sure." A few weeks later, my coworker friend Nora Patel invited me to join a support group for parents who'd been taken advantage of by their kids. I hesitated. I didn't want to reopen old wounds. But Nora said, "Not to complain, Marion, to show people still stuck in it that they're not alone." So I went. Small room, about 10 people every age. Some had their homes taken over, some had been drained to nothing. When it was my turn, I kept it short. My son once slapped labels on the fridge and tried to push me out of my own house. Today, that same son calls me Mom with a voice of a man who understands gratitude. The room went quiet, then filled with gentle applause. I didn't cry, but my heart warmed. For the first time, I told my story without shame, only freedom. One December evening, Texas went dark with a sudden outage. The whole block lost power. I dug up a few old candles and lit the kitchen. The flames danced on the walls, lighting up every corner cracks I'd patched, things I once feared to look at. I sat down, poured tea, and let the candlelight fall across Frank's photo. The house was so quiet I could hear the rain tapping the roof. In that moment I realized I'd gotten it all back, not the things, but my peace and my self-respect. I picked up my phone and texted Avery, "Thank you. Because of you, the door to life stayed open for both me and my son. That door doesn't just lead out, it leads back to our own hearts." Avery replied right away, "I only helped a little. You're the one who opened it, Marion." I set the phone down and smiled in the candlelight. The next morning, with sunlight cutting through the window, I got up early to prep Sunday lunch. In the pot was gumbo, Tyler's childhood favorite. I cooked slowly, stirred steadily, listening to the soft bubble while the radio played Frank's old jazz. I looked around the freshly painted kitchen, the clean curtains, the roses blooming on the porch. No more red labels on the fridge, no more orders barked at me, no more fear in my own home, just me and what I choose to keep: memory, kindness, and freedom. When the clock struck 11, I heard a car at the gate. Tyler right on time, as always. I wiped my hands and opened the door. My son stepped in, bringing the smell of wind and a warm smile. "Gumbo?" I could smell it from the corner. He grinned. I laughed. "Yep, where's the bread you promised?" He raised the bag. "Right here, your favorite." We set the table together. I looked at my son, calm eyes, straight shoulders, a real smile. 6 months ago, I thought I'd lost him for good. Now I had my son back and a friend, a man who knows gratitude and how to love the right way. As I sat down, I said quietly to myself, "Frank, you see it, right? The house is peaceful again. Both of us made it back from the old ashes." I ladled Tyler the first bowl of gumbo, steam curling up in rich ribbons. Outside, the sun lit the white roses along the porch, round blooms, pure and fragrant. And in that moment I understood, happiness doesn't come from what we hold on to, but from what we dare to let go of so we can find ourselves again. Sunday lunch that day filled the house with voices for the first time in years. The oak table wore a white lace cloth, and the gumbo's scent lingered in the air. Tyler, Lina, Nora, and Mrs. Gutierrez, everyone was there, sharing a meal that seemed ordinary but held an entire journey of forgiveness. Lina helped plate dessert, Nora brought apple cider, and Tyler fumbled around looking for a place to stash the plastic containers. As I washed my hands, I teased, "Do you have any idea how much those containers once tortured me?" Tyler laughed, pulled a small roll of labels from his pocket, and tilted his head. "I do. That's why I came prepared." He stuck a label on a plastic container, neatly printed, "Mom, do not touch." The whole table burst out laughing. The sound cracked something heavy that had sat on this house for so long. Mrs. Gutierrez dabbed her eyes, laughing and crying at once. Now I believe in miracles, they just sometimes arrive 6 months late. The meal drifted along in warm stories. Tyler talked about his new job, extra shifts, and a possible promotion to oversee the warehouse. Lina said she's taking professional baking classes. Nora shared about new families in the support group. When the last cup of tea was poured, everyone fell quiet for a few seconds. I looked around each familiar face, each voice, each glance, and realized I'd walked through the hardest road and come back to the simplest thing: peace. I started talking not like a teacher, but a fellow traveler. I told them about those first labels on the fridge, the nights I heard them plot to push me out, and the moment I learned to be silent, not from fear, but to prepare a counter with truth. They listened. No one interrupted. I didn't blame or condemn. I just said, "Some lessons cost tears and betrayed trust. But that price teaches us what we must never lose: our dignity." Tyler, sitting beside me, lowered his head, then quietly slipped off an old ring, the leftover from a broken marriage. He set it down and replaced it with a small leather cord and a metal tag etched with the word respect. "Mom," he said, voice tight but clear, "I can't erase what I did, but I can wear this to remember I only got you back when I learned respect." I touched the little tag, my heart trembling like I could hear Frank whisper, "Discipline is love in its hard form." I stood, walked to the small cupboard, opened it, and took out the silver USB I'd hidden while gathering evidence. I handed it to Tyler, my hand steady now. "This is what you should understand," I said, "so you never repeat it. Inside is everything I recorded from the days you forgot who you were to the day I made a choice that let both of us survive." Tyler took it and held on tight. He spoke slowly, his voice going rough. "You saved me, by making me face it." No one spoke. I saw Lena's eyes fill, Nora nod softly, and Mrs. Gutierrez press a hand to her chest. Out on the porch, San Antonio sunlight poured over the mesquite trees, changing leaves. A warm breeze moved the kitchen curtains. I looked at the bright yard where white roses crowded the path. The house that once trapped my fear had become a witness to courage. Tyler helped clear the table. Lena washed dishes. Nora turned on the old jazz. I heard the soft drum brush blend with the wind, and in that moment I knew, my story isn't just about loss, it's about how a woman learned to stand tall in her own home. I closed my old notebook and smiled, murmuring to myself, "Wealth isn't in the house, it's in what we refuse to let be taken our dignity." When everyone left, Tyler came back to give me a long hug. "I'll bring bread next Sunday, okay? Label it carefully," I said, and we both laughed. When the door closed, I went back in and sat at the table. There was still a plastic container with the words, "Mom, do not touch," sitting in the bright kitchen. I didn't peel it off. I left it there as a reminder that we're only truly free when we protect what's ours without hurting anyone. I sat by the window, watched the sunset wash across the wall, and thought about the people hearing this story maybe far away, in a quiet home where they were made to believe they had no worth. I want them to know you can start again just once, say enough to whatever shrinks you. If you've listened this far, you probably know that feeling too. If this story touched you, tell me where you're watching from. Share the moment you once said, "Enough, I truly want to read it." And if you found a bit of strength in this journey, please hit like, subscribe, and come back for the next chapter. Thank you for staying to the very end. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person listening for people like me, people once pushed to the margins to feel a little less alone in our own lives. I turned off the lights and let the soft evening glow spill through the window. Outside, the San Antonio breeze moved again, brushing past the white roses, and I knew that this time it was moving through a house with dignity. What is your age good for, Martha? Stay home, make soup, keep the cat, and stop dreaming about climbing mountains. My husband said it in the middle of our 40th anniversary dinner, his voice edged with mockery, and the whole table laughed. I laughed too, the kind of laugh people use to cover a fresh tear inside. When the guests left, and I was clearing spilled wine and wilted flowers, I found 2 tickets to Santorini in his suit pocket. A pair, one with his name, the other with Aaron's, the young assistant I had always thought was just a coworker. I stood still for a moment, then walked to the desk, opened the laptop, logged into our joint account, and transferred all the money into my name. No tears, no blame. That night I looked at myself in the mirror, smiled for the first time in years, and thought, if he thinks I'm too old to start over, he's about to see the opposite. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Martha Lane, 65 years old, living in Austin, Texas. I never thought I'd be the woman who starts over at this age. I once believed I had a steady marriage 40 years with Douglas, the man I'd loved since I was 25. We met at a church fundraiser. He was magnetic, a smooth talker with a smile that lit up the room. I was a simple elementary school teacher, then brown hair, a crew-neck sweater so shy I blushed when he asked me to dance. 40 years have passed since that dance. We married, bought a small house in the suburbs, and built a life. 2 children, a rose garden out back, and weekend picnics. I thought I was lucky. Douglas could be hot-tempered and a bit arrogant, but he was hard-working and driven. I was content to stand behind him, keep the home fires burning, cook warm dinners, and always have his coat ready when it turned cold. There was one thing I didn't see when people get used to being loved. They start to think that love is permanent. I don't know exactly when Douglas began to change. Maybe after he retired. He had been the CEO of a construction company, admired for being decisive and successful. When the nameplate came off his office door, I thought we would finally have time together. Douglas didn't. He hated quiet. He hated being forgotten. And I, the wife beside him for 4 decades, became a mirror of the thing he feared most: aging. He started spending hours at the gym, chatting with younger friends, complaining that I just stayed in the kitchen and wasn't interested in anything new. At first, I brushed it off. I thought it was a midlife crisis, but his words grew into small, slow, cold cuts. You don't understand business. You don't know anything about luxury travel. Someone your age shouldn't be driving long distances. I smiled, nodded, cleared the table, washed the dishes. Inside, I felt myself shrinking a little each day. And then, that night, our 40th anniversary, I realized my marriage had died. It just hadn't been buried. We held a small dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. Douglas wore a deep blue suit with a bow tie, still looking dapper. He was lively, joking, and trotted out fun memories that made me the punchline. Martha didn't know how to open the GPS. She thought Pisa was in Paris. Everyone laughed. I laughed along. In that laughter, I heard the cruelty of a man who once promised to cherish me. When I mentioned my dream of going to Greece, something I'd said for years, he looked at me and said it. "What is your age good for, Martha? Stay home, make soup, keep the cat, and stop dreaming about climbing mountains." The table roared. I stayed quiet, forced a smile, and felt something collapse inside. That night, when everyone was gone, the room smelled of old wine and wilted flowers. I cleared the table, wiped the glasses, and picked up a napkin on a chair. 2 papers slid out of his suit pocket. Plane tickets to Santorini. I read, carefully. 2 tickets. One name, Douglas Lane. The other, Aaron Miller. I didn't shake. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a strange stillness, as if the whole world had gone silent. Aaron, the young assistant who called me Mrs. Lane with a sweet smile and evasive eyes. I once thought she admired my husband like a mentor. He was taking her to the place I had longed to see. I sat down, laid the tickets on the table, and looked around the home we built. Wedding photos, keepsakes, vases, his framed honors on the wall. Suddenly, all of it felt foreign. I no longer saw a home. I saw the house of a man who once loved me and then forgot I existed. I stood up and went straight to his office, opened the computer, logged into the joint bank account. I'd managed our finances for years. There wasn't a password I didn't know. The balance popped up 6 figures, part from our retirement, part from savings. He assumed I would never touch it. He assumed I would always be reasonable. He was wrong. I moved all the money into my own account, the one he didn't know about. When the screen showed "transaction completed," my heart sped up. Not from fear, from release. No tears. No blame. Only quiet. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. Gray hair. Lines around my mouth. Eyes still bright. I put a hand on my chest, listened to my steady heartbeat, and smiled. For the first time in years, I saw a real woman looking back, not someone's shadow. I whispered, "If he thinks I'm too old to start over, he's about to see the opposite." I turned off the light, stepped out, and went to bed in a strange peace. Outside the window, Austin glowed in the night, and for the first time in decades, I felt myself breathing, truly breathing. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I knew one thing for sure. I would never again be the obedient wife he thought he knew. I met Douglas in the spring when I was 25. Austin was proud, still a small city then. Coffee shops smelled of pine, and country songs played on old radios. I had just graduated and was teaching elementary school. He was 27, managing a construction company that was growing fast. He swept in like a gust of wind, engaging, confident eyes, a smile that made you feel special. I remember that church fundraiser he asked me to dance, held my hand firmly, and said, "Your eyes make a man want to stay." I believed that line for half my life. We married 8 months later. A small, simple, warm wedding. I still have the photo, me in lace, Douglas gripping my hand, looking at me like the world was just us two. Back then I thought happiness meant this: build a home with the one you love, buy a house, have children, live quietly to the end. I didn't know happiness often doesn't die from disaster, but from tiny cracks no one notices. The early years were good. Douglas was diligent and ambitious. I backed every planned company, expansion, long business trips. When he traveled, I taught, raised the kids, paid the bills, cooked, kept everything running. I beamed when he took the stage for a state business award, hearing them thank the wife who stands behind him. I used to think that was an honor. But when a man gets used to applause, he forgets who kept the house from collapsing. Douglas changed, not with fights, but with gentle neglect. He stopped asking about my day, stopped noticing the small things I did to make him happy. Quiet dinners replaced conversations. He came home late, busy on his phone, sometimes greeting me with a nod. I set the table, poured the wine, waited, and told myself this was a tough season at work. Work made him richer and took him further from me. Douglas loved attention. At parties, he talked, joked, and craved admiring eyes. I stood beside him and smiled, the backdrop. When someone called me a lucky woman, he chuckled. "No, I'm the lucky one." I knew it. It wasn't true anymore. It was a line to save face. When the kids grew up and moved out, the house felt too big. I thought we'd finally have time together, travel, garden, read. Douglas couldn't stand the quiet. He needed applause, lights, and new people to prove he was still desirable. After retiring, he joined a golf club, old business groups, and mixers with younger colleagues. I liked mornings in the garden, afternoons cooking, evenings with old movies. Two parallel worlds, no conflict, no connection. I remember asking, "Do you miss sitting on the porch listening to crickets?" He brushed it off. "You still like all that quiet stuff?" "I need something more exciting." I never brought up old times again. Then he started criticizing me. It began as light jokes. "You don't get tech. Let me choose the restaurant. You don't know European food." Those jokes turned into weapons. "You dress like you're 70. Don't try dark lipstick. It doesn't suit you. Who even reads a paper anymore? So outdated." At first I was sad. Then I felt like a stranger in my own house. I tried to fix things, cooked his favorites, went to movies with him, asked about his new friends. He responded with polite indifference, the way you talk to someone you've known too long to care. I still remember my 60th birthday, just the two of us. I cooked, arranged flowers, bought his favorite red wine. As I cut the cake, he took a call. I heard laughter through the glass door. When he came back, he said, "Sorry, a friend wants me for golf this weekend." "No, happy birthday." I stared at the candle burning out. No fight, no tears, just a chill like cold ash. After that I realized, love doesn't vanish in a day. It erodes piece by piece. Each insult, each time he looked at me like an old object, love inside me lost another shard. I clung to habit anyway. People love so long they fear losing it even when it's already dead. When Douglas fully retired, things got worse. He was restless and irritable, complained about everything. Meals, the news, the weather, even me. "You speak too softly. It's tiring," he snapped. "You don't get the times. Don't give advice." I sat with my tea and stayed quiet. I wondered, is silence a way to keep peace, or a way to bury myself deeper? The answer came slowly. Surely. One morning, I was planting lavender out front. Douglas stepped out and said, "Do you ever think you're wasting your time?" I looked up. Wasting time on what? On things no one cares about. Flowers, baking, books. Do something practical, Martha. I didn't answer. I smiled and kept packing soil around the roots. In that moment I knew, the man who once loved me for my gentleness now despised it. I kept trying, like many wives do. I thought if I was patient and loving, he'd see it. He didn't. His cruelty wasn't in shouting, it was in not seeing me. Every time he walked past, without turning back. Every time he ate without saying thank you, I felt smaller. Our love, if we can call it that, turned into habit. A tired routine, smooth like an old clock that still runs though its hands are rusted. I woke, made coffee. He read the paper. I asked, "Sleep well?" He grunted. I cooked dinner, he ate, and said, "It's fine." The script played on, stale and emotionless. Some nights I woke and looked over. He lay still, breathing heavy, back turned. I realized we were two strangers sharing a house. I stared at the ceiling and asked myself, is this marriage or a cell we choose to live in? Day by day, his cruelty stopped hurting me. It made me tired. Too tired to be sad. I learned to stay quiet, smile at the right time, and avoid conflict. I thought I was preserving happiness, but I was only covering a cold house. Douglas liked to say, marriage is stability. In his version of stability, I was part of the furniture something he assumed would always be there. I once read that a marriage doesn't die from betrayal. It dies when one person stops looking at the other with love. I had seen that in his eyes for a long time, I just refused to admit it. Until that anniversary dinner when he said, "What is your age good for, Martha?" I realized the man across from me wasn't my husband anymore. He was a memory of someone who once loved me. The body belonged to the world out there. So I cleared away the last illusions. No yelling, no blame, no pleading. I simply stepped out of the role I'd played for 40 years. Because sometimes, when love has been dead a long time, silence is the final right. After that night, things changed between us, not with an explosion, but with a long, suffocating hush. Douglas started coming home later than usual. At first he said he was meeting old friends in investing. I believed him, or pretended to, because believing is easier than facing the truth. The meetings stretched to 10-11 p.m. Sometimes later, with a trace of perfume on his collar that wasn't mine. I asked softly, "Who keeps you out this late, Douglas?" He shrugged without looking at me. "Don't start doubting me, okay? Some friends are launching a new project. I'm just advising." I nodded. That night, while putting away his jacket, I found a receipt from an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the place we used to go when we were in love. 2 glasses of wine, 2 entrees, 1 tiramisu. No, client has dinner like that with a consultant. I folded the receipt and placed it in the wooden nightstand drawer. It was my first saved proof. Not to expose him, but to remind myself I wasn't crazy. When a woman lives in lies long enough, she needs evidence to believe her own instincts. In the days that followed, he kept coming home late, still calling them investment meetings. His phone stayed on silent, screen glowing blue while he typed at midnight. I lay, with my back turned, pretending to sleep, listening to the taps and small laughs between stretches of quiet. Sometimes I heard him say into the phone, voice lower than usual, "I miss you." Then silence. Then a long sigh that stung. I didn't ask again. My silence made him comfortable. That's what I realized. Men often mistake a wife's silence for acceptance, not knowing it can be the start of a storm. Then she appeared, Aaron Miller, his former assistant. Young, energetic, soft curls, pink gloss smile. The first time she stopped by with documents, she called me Mrs. Lane with syrupy sweetness and avoided my eyes. Douglas stood beside her, oddly restless. He said quickly, "Aaron just needs to go over something. You don't have to stay up, Martha." I smiled lightly. "I'm making tea. Would you like some?" She shook her head. He added, "No need. It'll just be a minute." They went into his office and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen with the teapot in my hand, heard a small laugh, then a long stretch of silence. When she left, he dodged my eyes and changed the subject. After that, Aaron was around more. Calls, texts, files at odd hours. One morning I heard her voice on the phone, too gentle, too familiar. I didn't say a word. I started writing. I bought a small brown leather notebook and kept it in my nightstand. Every odd thing went in it. Dates, times, the excuses he gave, and the small details, receipts, perfume, hastily deleted messages. I didn't write to accuse. I wrote to remind myself this was really happening. Then one day, checking the bank account, I saw steady weekly withdrawals from our joint fund, the same round number, not small. I didn't ask. I printed the statements and sealed them in an envelope under the leather notebook. He thought I never noticed because for years he handled the big finances. But I paid every bill and balanced every line. I knew where every dollar went. Now I knew this. Douglas was building a different life, one without me. The signs became too clear to ignore. One night after a meeting, I saw a faint lipstick mark on his white shirt collar. He said it was red wine, but I've washed his shirts for 40 years. I know the difference. I didn't get angry. I folded the shirt neatly and put it back in his closet without a word. My calm seemed to embolden him. The house became his hotel. Out early, home late, sometimes not at all. When I asked, he smirked. "Why be suspicious, Martha? I'm busy." "Don't be jealous. You're not young enough to understand business." That line, "You're not young enough," was a dull knife. It didn't slash, it carved. I nodded, turned away, and hid my trembling hands. After that, I woke earlier than usual. When the first light came into the kitchen, I made coffee and sat at the old wooden table with my leather notebook. I reread my entries. Dates, times, places, receipts, transactions, the first small tracks of betrayal, laid out in order. Nothing shocking, just plain truth on a page. I exhaled. Some pain can't cry, it can only be recorded. From then on, I watched him with new eyes. The extra minutes fixing his hair, checking his teeth, spraying cologne, glancing at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. I used to know every gesture of this man. Now, each one felt foreign. One afternoon, he fell asleep on the sofa. His phone buzzed nonstop. The screen lit with a text. "Are you asleep? I miss your laugh." I stared at the words, heard my heartbeat, took a photo, and emailed it to myself. Then I put the phone back, as if I'd never touched it. No one teaches you how to handle betrayal at 65. People say, keep the peace at this age. What peace is there when the person beside you gives his smile to someone else? I started gathering everything, not to take revenge, but to be ready. Like seeing a storm offshore. You don't scream, you shutter the windows and tie down the roof. I organized documents, statements, contracts, and deeds. Whenever he left, I opened the safe, snapped photos, and put everything back exactly. No one knew. He had no clue. To him, I was still the gentle, dependent wife. I learned to be silent to survive and to plan. One night, on the phone in his office, he chuckled. "She'll never suspect a thing." Don't worry. She trusts me completely. I sat in the dark kitchen and listened to each word like a farewell. Not a farewell to love, a farewell to the naive woman I used to be. After that, I stopped trying to fix anything. I watched. I waited. I let him grow bolder, let him believe I was still a compliant shadow. Each night I added lines to the notebook, taped in receipts, marked the time. Outside, the lavender by the porch began to bloom. I tended it every morning, watching the small purple flowers tremble in the breeze. Strangely, I didn't hurt anymore. Only clarity, cold but clear. I knew that. Soon I wouldn't need to pretend to be calm. The pretense itself would be the perfect cover for a plan he would never see coming. Douglas kept coming and going, smiling as if nothing in the house had changed. He didn't know that in every corner, every notebook line, every printed statement, I was laying the first bricks for what was next. A new life mine, without him. The day I found 2 tickets to Santorini, I knew we had reached the point of no return. There was nothing left to save, no reason to wait. All the doubts, the notes in my little notebook, the receipts and screenshot messages, they had all come together into a complete picture. Douglas didn't just betray me emotionally. He betrayed me deliberately by taking another woman to the very place I had dreamed of going with him. I sat on the living room couch, the 2 tickets still on the table, the light from the window making the words, Austin, Santorini glint with ridicule. Her name was printed clearly under, Passenger 2, Aaron Miller. I read it over and over, as if my mind needed time to carve it into memory one more time to never forget. That evening, Douglas came home late as usual. Seeing me folding laundry on the sofa, he said in a flat voice, I have to go to Europe for 2 weeks, a few meetings with old partners. I looked up at him and asked softly, Where in Europe? He answered without blinking, Italy, then Greece. I'll be busy, don't wait up. I smiled a light smile like a breeze, the one he'd known for decades. Is that so? Remember to bring a coat. Europe is still cold in April. He nodded, perhaps a little surprised that I didn't ask more. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He thought I was still the gentle, gullible wife who would see him off at the door with reminders and a habitual kiss. And I let him think so. 3 days later, Douglas packed his suitcase. He chose new shirts, sprayed extra cologne, checked his passport, tickets, and cash. He gave me a perfunctory kiss before stepping out, that cologne, a scent I had begun to hate, drifting past and disappearing with the slam of the car door. The engine started and faded away. I stood at the window watching, not a tear, not a sigh. What came first wasn't pain, but relief. For years I had lived in a cage made of contempt. And now, with the door open, all I wanted was to take a deep breath and know I was still alive. I went into the office and turned on the computer. The screen lit up, the familiar numbers appeared. I logged into the bank. In the transaction list, I saw recent charges. Gifts, restaurants, hotels, the names hidden beneath codes. Each number felt like a cut. I pressed a few keys, froze all of Douglas's secondary cards, changed the access codes, and moved the money into my own account. In the instant the transfer was confirmed, I felt like I had just taken chains off my wrists. For so many years I managed our family's money but never truly owned it. Today I did not out of greed, but to protect the rest of my life. The next morning I called the bank to block all of Douglas's access. The representative's voice was polite. Are you sure you want to temporarily lock your husband's secondary account, Mrs. Lane? I answered calmly. I'm sure. Very sure. Then I picked up the phone and called an old acquaintance, Mr. Collins, who owned a dealership in South Austin. Douglas's black sports car was his greatest pride. He used to say, "This car makes me feel young again." I smiled at the memory. Then let's see how he feels when it's gone. I asked Mr. Collins to come see the car that day. When he arrived, I handed over the title all in my name because I had bought it for Douglas's birthday long enough ago that he'd forgotten. Nice car. Are you sure you want to sell it? I'm sure. I need to make room for something new. I said it so evenly that I surprised even myself. Mr. Collins offered a fair price. I signed the paperwork and handed him the keys. As the car rolled out of the gate, the afternoon sun flashed on the paint so brightly I could see my face in it. That face no longer looked afraid, only peaceful. I chose silence in exchange for a clean counterstrike. Do you agree with what I did? If not, how would you do it differently? I truly want to know your answer. I went back inside, poured a cup of chamomile tea, and sat by the window. In my mind, I pictured Douglas walking the cobblestone streets of Santorini, hand in hand with her, believing he'd outsmarted his foolish old wife. He didn't know that every step he took there was a step I used to prepare to leave his life. That afternoon, I called an old friend, Judith, who had worked at a law office. I was direct. I need a good, discreet divorce attorney. She hesitated, then replied, I know someone. Catherine Boyd. She's very trustworthy. I wrote down the number and scheduled to meet Catherine the next morning. That night, I opened the desk drawer and took out the brown leather notebook, the place where I had kept all the evidence over time. Restaurant receipts, bank statements, screenshot messages, lipstick on his collar. I arranged them carefully into a folder. As I pulled the zipper closed, it felt like closing a chapter of my life. The next morning, I went to the law office. Catherine Boyd was in her early 50s, with bright eyes and a steady, low voice. I told her everything, from the belittling comments to the proof of betrayal. She listened in silence, occasionally taking notes, never interrupting. When I finished, she simply said, You've already done the hardest part, Martha. The rest is procedure. Hearing that, my shoulders loosened. Maybe because for the first time in years, someone was on my side. Catherine helped me begin the divorce process quietly. She guided me to separate accounts, list assets, and file with the court. At the right time. I listened, took notes, and followed through. One action at a time, careful, quiet. When I stepped outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of coffee from a nearby shop. I stood on the sidewalk, watching people pass, and realized I wasn't trembling anymore. I was stepping into a new world, one I would steer. 3 days later, when the paperwork was nearly done, I opened the drawer and took out my wedding ring. The worn gold band was engraved, Forever Yours. I held it in my hand, it felt cold. For 40 years, I believed that promise so much, I forgot I deserved to be loved as a person. I placed the ring in a wooden box, locked it, and put it in the bottom drawer. Not to keep a memory, but to remind myself that love without respect is only a shadow of the past. In the days that followed, I inventoried every document in the house: the deed, shares, insurance, retirement plans. I photographed each page, saved them to a USB drive, and hid it in an old book Douglas never read. Each action was small, but each one made me feel alive again. I was no longer a passive woman. I was writing my life over. On Saturday afternoon, I sat in the living room as slanting sunlight poured through the window, bathing everything in a honey gold glow. On the table, there were no plane tickets, no papers of his, only a teacup, an open notebook, and the line I'd just written, "When people think you're weak, that's exactly when you're at your strongest." I looked up through the glass. Outside, a light breeze stirred the lavender stems. I smiled. After 40 years of being bound, I finally understood. Freedom isn't running away, it's staying and changing the game. And in that quiet house, for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten, a tremor of happiness. Not the happiness of being loved, but of learning to love myself again. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Thin spring light filtered through the curtains and fell across the wooden table where I had sat so many nights, planning my new life. On the table, next to a steaming cup of chamomile tea, was a white envelope. Inside was the cashier's check I planned to withdraw today. I put on a pale blue blouse and slacks, tied my hair back neatly, and looked in the mirror. No concealer, no trying to look younger. I just wanted to see myself a 65-year-old woman who had lived through enough pain to recognize peace. When I stepped outside, the Texas sky was startlingly blue. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh grass, and for the first time in years, I felt a flutter in my chest. I drove to the bank, a place I'd visited hundreds of times, but today, each step through the glass doors felt like stepping into a new chapter. The teller counter was bright as always, with a hint of coffee in the air. A young teller with her blonde hair tied back looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Lane. How can I help you?" "Today?" I answered in a calm but steady voice. "I'd like to withdraw funds from the joint account and open a new account, in my name only." She paused for a beat, then nodded quickly. "Of course." "May I see your ID?" I set my ID on the counter. As her pen moved across the form, my eyes fell on the bold words, "Primary account holder, Martha Lane." Just a few words, but they caught in my throat. "How much would you like to withdraw?" she asked, eyes on the screen. I looked directly at her and said gently but firmly, "All of it." She glanced up, a flicker of surprise, then a small smile. "I understand." When the check printed, she set it before me with a silver pen. "Please sign here, Mrs. Lane." I took the pen. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from emotion. I've signed thousands of things in my life, bills, letters, papers on my husband's behalf, but this was the first time I signed purely as myself. No one behind me, no one allowing, no one supervising. When the last stroke closed, I exhaled. It felt like stepping out of a dark room after 40 years. The teller handed me the envelope with the check and a new card, still smelling like fresh plastic. "Congratulations, your account is active. From now on, you have full control." I smiled and took the envelope. Power spread through me, not the power to rule anyone, but the quiet power of freedom. In that moment, I felt myself standing between two worlds. On one side, the woman who endured. On the other, the woman learning to live for herself. Outside, noon sunlight washed the trees, turning the air golden. I stood on the steps and took a deep breath. It wasn't joy or excitement, it was a strange serenity, like when the last storm has passed and the ground is yours again. On the way home, I turned into the mall, a place I rarely visited unless Douglas wanted to buy something. I didn't plan to buy anything, just to walk. But when I passed a boutique window, a dress made me stop. It was a long dress in wine red, a color Douglas used to say, older women shouldn't wear. I remembered him saying at a party, "Red is too loud on you. It doesn't suit your age." I hadn't touched red in 20 years. Today, I walked in. The young clerk smiled. "That color looks great on you. Want to try it?" I smiled. No need to try. I'm sure. The fabric felt smooth in my hands, light yet warm. I brought it to the counter and paid with my new card, the one that said Martha Lane, and no one else. I didn't get in the car right away. I walked along the street, the breeze lifting a few strands of hair, sunlight bouncing off the glass. For a moment, I saw my reflection. Not the 65-year-old woman he called old and outdated, but the 30-year-old I once was, confident, alive, needing no one's permission to feel beautiful. I stopped at a small corner cafe and ordered a cappuccino. By the window, I watched. People pass and ran a hand over the new dress. I felt like I was living for the first time. No longer someone's wife. No longer a shadow behind a man. I was just me, whole, independent, free. On the table was the notebook I still carry out of habit. I opened it and wrote, "Today I was born again." I paused, reread it, and smiled. If anyone asked how I took revenge, I'd say, I didn't need revenge. I just needed to live so well he'd realize what he lost. I sat there a long time, watching the light change on the wall, hearing cups clink, and feeling a quiet, steady heartbeat. A new feeling, not rage, not bitterness, just a silent, powerful rebirth. As afternoon came on, I stepped out, the dress fluttering in the breeze. The road ahead was long and bright, no longer the familiar path back to a house heavy with memories, but a road open to the second half of my life. I knew that from now on my days wouldn't revolve around duties or roles. I would relearn how to love myself, how to savor an unhurried cup of coffee, how to walk without asking permission. When I opened the car door, the last light of day lit the red dress like a small flame. I said softly to myself, sometimes the best revenge isn't making someone else hurt, it's bringing yourself back to life, brighter than ever. As the car rolled forward, I turned up an old song one Douglas used to hate and call corny. I cranked it loud and sang along, my voice rough in the late sun. No one to interrupt, no one to frown. Just me, a 65-year-old woman laughing to herself on the highway, feeling truly free for the first time. On Monday morning, I went to Catherine Boyd's office, the attorney Judith recommended. It was in an old red brick building downtown, tall windows casting soft light onto plants along the hall. The space felt both formal and warm, and I no longer felt like a wife suing her husband, but a woman about to start a new life. Catherine greeted me with a small smile and very bright eyes. She was in her early 50s, short brown hair, confident and sharp. Her handshake was warm and firm. "I'm Catherine. Judith told me a little. Please have a seat." Her office was simple and tidy, a few small paintings on the wall. On her desk, a stack of files, a fountain pen, a steaming cup of coffee. She pulled out a chair, looked straight at me, and said in a low, clear voice, "First, I want to say this. You've already done the hard part. You stepped out. Not everyone can do that after 40 years of marriage." I gave a small, hoarse laugh. I wouldn't call it brave. Just, I've had enough. Catherine nodded, didn't interrupt. The way she listened made me feel safe, like someone finally understood. I opened my bag and took out the folder I'd prepared. Bank statements, restaurant receipts, screenshots, and printed copies of the 2 Santorini tickets. I laid them out neatly, quietly, like presenting evidence in a case, which it was, except the defendant was the man I'd slept beside half my life. Catherine turned each page, jotting quick notes in red. Her voice stayed calm and decisive. "This is a very solid file, Martha. With this evidence, we can prove infidelity and financial deception. Do you want a contested divorce, or do you prefer to end it quietly?" I looked at her and spoke slowly. "I don't need noise. I just want my share, and my freedom. Then we'll proceed discreetly. I'll draft the petition and file within 2 days. After that, we'll just need signatures. How long until he finds out? Once filed, notice will be mailed to his address a few days. He'll be shocked, I'm sure." I pressed my lips together, a mix of bitterness and relief. "He's always thought I'd never dare." Catherine gave a faint, reassuring smile. "Most men like that do. Their biggest mistake is underestimating a woman when she's silent." I clenched my hands in my lap. Yes, I had been silent too long, and that silence had made him feel safe. Not anymore. We reviewed the assets. The house, Douglas's shares in his former company, retirement funds, savings. I produced copies of everything I'd prepared. Catherine took careful notes, occasionally looking up to ask small details. Each question pulled me deeper into reality, one I was now ready to face. "I'll need your signature on the formal petition," Catherine said, placing papers before me. "Today is just a preliminary version, but it takes effect once we file." I looked at the page. The bold line at the top read, "Petition for divorce." Years ago, the word alone might have made me shake. Today, my hand was steady. I took a breath, picked up the pen, and signed, Martha Lane. No tremor. No hesitation. Catherine watched and nodded slowly. Good. You know, most of my clients cry at this moment. But you're different. I smiled faintly. I've cried all my tears. Now I just want to live. She smiled back, then said softly, Douglas will be shocked when he learns what you've done. I lifted my head, voice even. He's always thought I was weak. His biggest mistake. We were quiet for a few seconds. Outside, wind brushed the windows, traffic murmured. In that room I felt a kind of energy, not loud or fierce, but steady and warm. Maybe it's the strength found in women who endured too long and finally chose to stand up. Catherine gathered the files and looked at me with empathy. Martha, you remind me of my mother. She lived in her husband's shadow for 30 years, until one day she left with a single suitcase. Signing this paper, sometimes it's the way to begin again. I nodded. I understand, and I think I've just begun. She stood and offered her hand. I'm honored to stand with you. Let me handle the legal side. You go live. We shook hands again. Her hand was warm and strong. In that moment, I didn't feel alone anymore. When I stepped out of the building, the Texas sun blazed. Light flashed on the glass so bright I had to squint, but I didn't turn away. I let the sun hit my face, warm and glaring like a baptism in light. I paused on the steps and took a deep breath. The city was still noisy, people still rushing, but for me everything seemed slower. In my hand was a copy of the divorce petition. In my heart was a quiet I had never known. Maybe this is what people mean by freedom, not when you leave, but when you stop being afraid. I walked down to the sidewalk, the red dress fluttering in the wind. Each step felt like breaking another invisible cord that had bound me for 40 years. In the harsh midday sun, I saw my shadow on the pavement straight, clear, no longer hidden behind anyone else. I thought of Douglas, of the moment he'd open his mailbox and see my name on the petition. Not a reproach, not a plea, just a dry line powerful enough to end everything. I pictured his face, eyes wide, lips pressed, arrogance collapsing in an instant. The thought didn't make me gloat. It made me serene. I smiled and whispered, like a farewell, This is the first time in my life, Douglas, that I signed my name and it didn't belong to you. Then I turned and walked into the Texas sunlight, feeling it wrap around me like a blessing. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in decades, I know this. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. When Douglas left, the house that had once made me feel suffocated turned quiet in a different way, not the heavy kind of silence, but the clear hush of an early summer morning. No more slamming doors, no more weary sighs, no more voice complaining that the coffee was too strong or the breakfast too bland. Only the wind slipping through the window frame, and my heartbeat, light as a whisper, "You're free now, Martha." At first, that quiet unsettled me. I was used to his footsteps, used to the sound of keys turning in the lock every night. But a few days later, I began to realize that his absence brought back something I had forgotten. Space to live for myself. Every morning, I brewed a small pot of coffee, just for me. Not the bitter kind Douglas liked, but something lighter, vanilla coffee, sweet and fragrant. I opened the window to let the early sun pour into the kitchen. The golden light spread across the table, over the white porcelain cup, over my hands. I turned on the old radio. A soft jazz tune rose like a sigh, and I sat there, taking small sips, listening to sparrows outside the porch. Strangely, the things I once thought were small became sacred. I started to tidy the house, not for anyone else, but because I wanted it to reflect who I am. I took down the photos. Douglas had hung portraits of him at award ceremonies, in the office, the kind of pictures he liked because they looked prestigious. I replaced them with old photos. My children when they were little, a beach trip with friends, and a picture of me at 25, messy hair, sand on my face, but a radiant smile. In the afternoon, I went to the garden. The garden Douglas used to call a waste of time. I reclaimed old flower beds and turned the dry soil. At first my hands trembled from being out of practice, but when the smell of fresh earth mixed with lavender, I felt my heart soften. I planted tulips, roses, and a few pots of white daisies. I called that garden my second spring. Then I learned to paint. One afternoon I passed the neighborhood community center and saw a sign, "Beginners Painting Class All Ages." I stood at the door for a long moment, then walked in. The teacher, a woman about 40, greeted me with a smile. It's been a while since I've seen someone come to class with eyes that eager. I laughed and answered, "Maybe because I forgot I could still start something new." The first time I held a brush, my hand shook, but after a few strokes, I found peace in each line. No one there to say, "That's ugly," no one to tell me I was wasting time. Just colors, canvas, and the steady sound of my own breathing. When I finished the first painting, just a vase on a table, I burst into tears. Not because it was beautiful, but because I felt I had recovered a piece of my soul I'd dropped somewhere in the years of being a dutiful wife. In the late afternoons, I rolled out a yoga mat in the living room. Sunlight stretched across the wood floor, and I followed a video on the screen slowly, breath by breath. At first, my knees creaked, but I was patient. After a few days, I felt more flexible, lighter, and strangest of all, happier. I wasn't exercising to get younger, not to impress anyone, just to feel alive in this body. I started calling old friends. The ones Douglas never liked because they talk too much and are fake. Optimists. I called Helen, my college friend I'd lost touch with for nearly 20 years. She answered, her voice bursting with surprise. "Martha? Is that Martha Lane? I thought you disappeared from the world." I laughed. "No, I was just held hostage for a while. I've been released now." We laughed like two young girls. Helen invited me over for dinner. I brought a bottle of red wine. That night, we talked without stopping. About the old days, about life, about the things no one teaches women they have the right to do. When I told her about the divorce, Helen held my hand, her eyes bright. "I'm proud of you. Not because you left him, but because you chose yourself." Her words left me quiet. That's right. I chose myself. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for it. Day by day, I fell in love with peaceful mornings again. I woke early, threw the windows wide open, took a deep breath, and let sunlight and the scent of flowers pour in. I filled the house with music, jazz, country, even old love songs Douglas used to call corny. I played them loud and sang while making coffee. No one frowned. No one said, "Keep it down." Just me and the birds outside weaving a soundtrack for old age. Once, while I was trimming flowers, my neighbor, Betty, who's lived next door for more than 20 years, stopped by. She leaned on the wooden fence and grinned. "You look different, Martha. I've never seen you this happy." I looked up, hands dirty with soil, hair damp with sweat, and smiled softly. "I just learned how to breathe, Betty." She chuckled and teased. "So the secret to happiness is learning how to breathe?" I nodded. "Yeah, I've spent my whole life breathing for other people. Now I finally know what it's like to take a breath just for me." She looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, "You make me believe people can start over at any age." After she left, I sat by the flower bed, watching the newly opened tulips. Sunlight lit each bright red petal, and I realized freedom doesn't come from leaving someone. It comes from the moment you stop asking permission to live. In the evening, I opened my journal and wrote a few lines. Freedom isn't loud or performative. It's the coffee you brew yourself, the music you choose, the breeze you let touch your cheek. And when peace returns, you don't want revenge, you just want to thank yourself for not giving up. I set down the pen, closed the notebook, and looked around the house glowing with soft lamplight. For 40 years, I used to fear the dark when Douglas traveled, but now I love it because it's quiet, because it's mine. On the table, the frame I'd just painted was still wet. A woman standing in a garden, arms open to the wind. I looked at it and smiled. Turns out, the woman in the painting was me, the one who just relearned how to breathe, how to live, and how to love her own life. And in that little house in Austin, amid lavender and the sound of insects outside the porch, I knew one thing for sure. Freedom isn't a prize after divorce. It's a life I should have had long ago. That morning, sunlight lay gold across the porch as always. I was putting a few fresh lavender sprigs into a glass vase when the phone rang. The screen showed the name Douglas Lane. A brief stillness swept over me. I looked at that name and felt no stab, just the sense of seeing a stranger I once knew. I picked up. "Hello." His voice came bright and noisy, like he was in the middle of a party. "Martha, everything at home okay? I just wanted to make sure you're—" "All right," I chuckled softly, my tone as light as talking about the weather. "Everything's fine, Douglas. Enjoy your trip." On his end, he laughed loudly. I could hear glasses clinking. Then his voice came mixed with the sound of waves. "You know, this place is stunning. The sea is so blue. The wine is better than I imagined. I'm at a restaurant right on the cliff. The view is all Santorini." I listened, but my mind no longer pictured what he described. Santorini, a place I once dreamed of going with him, was now just the backdrop to betrayal. His voice kept going, excited like a child set free. "People really know how to live here, Martha. They don't care about age. They enjoy every second. You should see the sky. The sunsets are on fire." Suddenly, laughter rang out beside him. A young, clear, sweet voice, and then his tone dropped. "Aaron, don't let me finish this call." A brief silence. I heard wine being poured and waves rolling in steady rhythm. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Everything I needed to know was in those sounds. He cleared his throat and tried to sound normal. I just called to make sure you're doing well." I answered, still calm and even. "I'm well, and you enjoy your vacation. You deserve it." I heard him laugh, a sound at once smug and careless. Then he said, likely not noticing the change in how I addressed him, "I'll bring you a gift, maybe a Greek silk scarf. You like ocean blue, right?" I replied softly, "No need, Douglas. I already have everything I need." A slight hesitation on the line. I imagined him frowning, trying to figure out what sounded different in my voice. But then he chuckled it off. "You're always so modest. Anyway, I've got to go. See you when I'm back." I just said, "Sure, see you." The call ended. The dial tone clicked. Neat, as a period closing a long, rotten chapter. I set the phone down, sat still for a few seconds, then laughed. Not a bitter laugh, a relieved one, the kind you make when you've slipped out of a dark room and don't carry any resentment with you. I brewed another cup of coffee. The aroma filled the room, mixing with the lavender from the porch. In my mind, I saw Douglas on a Santorini balcony, a glass of wine in hand, the blonde secretary leaning into his shoulder. They probably thought they were living in a romantic movie. And me? I was living a real life, one where I was no longer a supporting character. That afternoon, Catherine called. "Martha, the court has approved the asset filings. We just need a few final signatures and we're done." I went to the office that same day. The room was as bright as the first time, but I felt different, no nerves, no unease. I sat down and read carefully through each page. Every line was a track of the past being unfastened. When Catherine slid the pen toward me, she said softly, "Once you sign here, everything will officially belong to you. The accounts, the house, the shares, all of it." I nodded and picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name in firm, clear strokes. The words Martha Lane stood whole, like a declaration. When I finished, Catherine smiled. "I've seen many people sign in tears, but you're different. You sign like you're opening a new door." I answered, gentle but resolute. "Because that's exactly what it is, Catherine. This door doesn't take me anywhere else. It just leads me back to myself." She nodded, eyes warm. "I hope you sleep well tonight." I smiled, looking out the window where the sunset was spilling over distant rooftops. "I'm sure I will." And I was right. That night, when I got home, the house glowed with soft amber light. I lit a small candle in the kitchen, made a simple vegetable soup, and turned on a favorite song. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, listening to the rain patter on the roof. No phone ringing, no keys turning, only the candle's warmth, the food's aroma, and the peace inside me. By the time I went to bed, the rain had stopped. I lay on my back, stared at the ceiling, and noticed my heartbeat steady, unhurried. For the first time in decades, I truly slept. No dreams, no jolting awake, no lying there, scared of the door opening. In that sleep, I dreamed of the sea, but not Santorini, a Texas beach I used to visit when I was young. I stood alone, barefoot on the sand, waves at my heels, the sky clear and blue. I smiled, looking for no one, needing no one. The next morning, I made coffee, opened the window, and breathed in the cool air. I knew that in Santorini, Douglas was probably sitting on a balcony, glass of wine in hand, thinking he'd reached the peak of freedom. But he didn't know that at that very moment, I, the woman he left behind, was breathing real freedom. And maybe, in that paradise view, when he raised his glass and laughed with Aaron, the wine in it was being poured over the ashes of himself. I smiled, took a sip of coffee, let the warmth move down my throat, and said softly to myself, not with resentment, but with absolute serenity, "Thank you, Douglas. Because of you, I learned what freedom is." That afternoon, the Texas sun burned hot. I sat in the wicker chair by the window, reviewing the final asset agreement Catherine had sent over, each line neat and clear proof of the freedom I'd won with patience. Outside, a taxi stopped at the gate. The jazz track in the room cut off mid-phrase, and I knew the moment had come. Douglas was back. I heard the suitcase rolling over the brick path, the steady tap of leather shoes. Then the door swung open hard enough to make the air in the house shiver. He stepped in tanned skin, salt and pepper hair swept back, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sunglasses still hooked there. He stood in the living room, chin lifted like he'd returned from a grand tour, wearing that old arrogance, the look of a man who believed the world would sit still and wait for him. I stayed seated, folded the paper, and said quietly, "Welcome back." He smiled, set down the suitcase, voice a bit condescending. "Yeah, I'm back. Everything all right?" I just shrugged. "All good. Very good." Douglas looked around. His gaze caught the small changes only someone who'd lived here long would notice. The wedding photo gone from the shelf, a landscape painting replaced by my lavender painting, and on the coffee table a travel magazine open to Women Rebuilding Their Lives After 60. A flicker of doubt crossed his eyes, but he shrugged it off. He walked to the window, looked outside, then froze. The driveway was empty. "Where's the car?" he asked, his voice no longer light. I took a slow sip of tea. "Sold." He spun around, his sun-darkened face flushing even redder. "What? What did you do?" I said, "It's sold. Someone offered a good price. I think you'll be pleased." He frowned and stepped closer, his shoes thumping the wood floor. You had no right. That car is mine! I set down the teacup, my voice still calm. The title's in my name, Douglas. I bought it for your birthday last year, remember? I simply decided to take my gift back, that's all. He was speechless for a few seconds, then inhaled sharply, trying to tamp down his anger. I saw his jaw twitch. Fine, I won't argue. You still have the secondary card, right? I need to pull some cash. He took out his wallet, grabbed the bank card, and swiped it on the small reader I use for electronic payments. A dry beep. The screen read, "Transaction declined." He tried again. Same result. A third time his hand started to shake. Why? Why is it declined? I smiled and tilted my head, maybe because that card no longer works. I've locked all your access. What did you do? His voice dropped, dangerous. I stood and faced him, my tone as even as talking about the weather. I withdrew the money, all of it. And the divorce petition has been filed. Time seemed to freeze. Douglas stood stiff, eyes wide, disbelief written on his face. He repeated, choking on the words, "You filed for divorce?" I nodded. Yes. His whole body tensed. Then suddenly he laughed, a harsh sound pushed through clenched teeth. "Martha, you're joking, right? You? You would dare do that?" I looked at him, my calm gaze slowly snuffing out his laugh. "I'm not joking, Douglas. I'm doing what should have been done long ago." He stepped in close, breathing hard, Greek wine on his breath. "You're not allowed," he growled. "My name is on everything. I supported you for 40 years. I looked straight into his eyes and didn't step back. "Wrong, Douglas. I don't need your permission anymore. And you didn't support me. We built this together. Now I'm only taking back what's mine." His face burned, his eyes a mix of shock and collapse. I saw something break in him, maybe the illusion that I'd always be there, obedient like a piece of furniture. He turned, strode around the room, muttering, "Impossible. Impossible. You don't have the guts. You—" I cut in, soft but clear. "You once said older women shouldn't dream. But I did not of Santorini, of a day I could live without being afraid of you. And today, I woke up." Douglas stopped. For the first time in years, he looked at me without contempt, stunned instead. Maybe for a flicker of a moment, he realized the woman before him was no longer the dutiful wife who bowed to his temper. I calmly picked up the paper and found my place again. "If you're tired, rest. The living room still has space for you to sleep. In the morning, your attorney will receive the papers." "My attorney?" he repeated, voice hoarse. "Yes, because from now on, everything between us goes through attorneys." Douglas looked around the house again, the place that used to be his kingdom. But now, nothing belonged to him. Even the air no longer carried his old scent of control. It held only lavender and the quiet murmur of jazz from the speakers. He clenched his fists, his lips shaking like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Finally, he managed one line, "You'll regret this." I smiled, lifted my head, and said as calmly as a blessing, "No, Douglas. For the first time in my life, I don't regret a thing." I sat back down and kept reading. He stood there, rigid as a statue, then turned, opened the door, and stepped out. The door shut with a hard click. A gust of air slipped in, rustling the newspaper in my hands. I looked out the window and watched his figure fade. A sun-browned man in a dusty white shirt, walking fast like he wanted to run from a place that used to be his. I felt no pity, no glee, only relief. I took a small sip of warm tea and smiled to myself. Everything Douglas had tried to grip, money, power, control, had evaporated like smoke. And there I was, the woman he'd called weak, sitting in my own home, peaceful, self-possessed, and free. And in that moment, I realized no scream is louder than the silence of a woman who has stopped being. afraid. Douglas turned back and stopped in the middle of the living room. Light from the doorway fell across his tanned face, but there was nothing radiant in it, only collapse spiderwebbing under pride. He looked at me, eyes bloodshot, then roared like an animal cornered. "You are nothing without me, Martha." The words slammed into the room, bounced off the walls and thinned into air. I lifted my head and looked straight at him. In that instant, I saw 40 years of my life, dinners I sat through in silence, times he cut me off in front of friends, mornings I woke early to cook while he played golf and called it family burdens. I smiled gently. Not a bitter smile, the smile of someone who finally sees her life clearly. "No, Douglas. Because of you, I was nothing for 40 years. He froze. That sentence made him step back half a pace, as if someone had just slapped his pride. I went on, my voice not loud, but every word landing heavy and solid as stone. I once believed marriage was about sharing, that I was standing beside a true partner. But all these years, I was the one walking behind you, wiping away your footprints, clearing the road so you could keep going. You didn't see me, because you only looked at yourself." Douglas clenched his fists, trying to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. He had never heard me speak this much, and he had never seen me this calm. "You used to say I was old, I was slow, that I didn't understand this world. You laughed when I wanted to take a painting class, when I talked about my little dreams. But you were wrong, Douglas. I'm not slow, I was just exhausted from living at your pace." He panted, staring straight at me. You've changed." I nodded slightly, a brief smile passing like a sliver of sunlight. "It's not that I've changed now. It's that I finally came back to who I really am." The room fell into silence. Only the ticking clock and the clear beat of my heart remained. Douglas bowed his head, both hands braced on the table like a man who had just lost his footing. After a long moment, he looked up, his voice rough. "Do you really think you can live without me?" I looked at him, so calm it surprised even me. "I've been living without you for years, Douglas. I just didn't realize it before." His eyes trembled, as if each thing I said pulled loose another piece of truth he'd tried to cover up. I stepped closer, just enough for him to see my face clearly. No fear, no pleading, only clarity. "You said I was too old to begin. You were wrong. I'm only just beginning." The air felt sliced in two. Douglas stood there, breathing hard, his eyes a blur of anger, confusion, and regret, though he'd never admit it. Finally he roared, "I don't need to hear any more." He grabbed his suitcase and yanked it toward the door. The wheels rattled over the wood floor, long and scraping, like the breath of a man who's losing everything. Before stepping out, he turned to look at me, trying to cling to one last scrap of authority. "You'll see. No one will want a woman like you." I answered softly, without anger or bitterness. "Maybe. But I've learned something. I don't need anyone to want me anymore. I just need me to want to live." The door slammed. The hard thud made the teacup on the table quiver. Then, silence. A complete silence. I stood still. My hand rested on my chest, feeling my heart race not from fear, from excitement, from release, from the feeling of someone who has come through a storm and is still standing. I drew a long breath and looked around the room. The house was the same, yet somehow everything was different. No more heavy footsteps, no more breath filling every corner that wasn't mine. Only me, the warmth of tea, and glittering light on the window frame. I walked slowly through each room, brushing my fingers over the table, the picture frames, the half-finished painting. Suddenly everything had a soul, alive as if the house itself was breathing with me after being held down for too long. I opened the window. The wind came in, carrying the scent of lavender. Outside, The late afternoon sun slanted across the wooden fence where a few sparrows chirped to one another. I smiled a real smile, unforced, unhidden. I sat at the table and opened my journal. My hand moved slowly, each word appearing clear. Today, Douglas left. I didn't lose a husband. I got myself back. For 40 years, I lived as someone else's shadow. Now I'm standing in my own light. And if anyone asks whether I'm afraid, I'll say yes, I am. But I chose to walk forward even while afraid. And that is what set me free. I set down my pen, closed the journal, and looked around the house once more. Strange how even today's silence felt different, not empty, but peaceful. I made another cup of tea and put on an old jazz record. The soft saxophone drifted through the rooms. I closed my eyes and listened. In my mind, there were no more shouts, no figure blocking the doorway. Just me, my breath, and the steady beat of my heart. I whispered, to myself, or maybe to the sky outside, at last, I have a life of my own. And in that moment, I knew everything was truly beginning. After Douglas left, the house stayed quiet for an entire morning. But it wasn't the kind of quiet that makes you feel alone, it was the stillness of a new beginning. I made a cup of tea and threw open every window so the breeze could carry the scent of lavender from the yard inside. The morning sun spilled onto the floor like honey, laying a warm light over everything I hadn't fully felt in 4 decades. I decided to repaint the house. The living room walls, once a tired beige, I changed to a pale sea glass green, the color of fresh mornings and calm air. I hired a few young painters to help, and together we moved furniture, laughed, and debated paint. Swatches. When the new coat dried, the room felt entirely different. Brighter, wider, alive. I replaced all the old curtains, those heavy drapes Douglas favored to block the sun with sheer cream panels that let the afternoon breeze move gently through. Then I hung my own paintings on the walls, imperfect, uneven, but born from quiet afternoons at the window, my hand a little unsteady on the brush, and my heart at ease. Each canvas told a small story. A lavender vase, a wooden window frame, or simply the blazing sky I watched every evening. For the first time, this house reflected who I am, not the frame he built to display stability and success. I replanted the back garden. Lavender, white daisies, herbs, and a small row of climbing roses along the fence. Every morning I watered the beds, inhaled the damp soil, and watched the sunlight prickle on the dew. Something in that sight softened my chest as if nature itself was wrapping me up, saying, "Welcome home, Martha." A few weeks later, I decided to travel. Not with anyone, not waiting for an invitation. Just me and a small suitcase. I chose Colorado, a place I'd dreamed of when I was young, but Douglas always brushed off because the mountains are cold and there's nothing to do. I booked a ticket and rented a little cabin near Estes Park. As the bus climbed the winding pass, I looked through the window. Snow dusted the far peaks, and dark green pines stretched to the horizon. No one beside me, no orders, and for the first time, I felt light all over. I spent mornings walking the lake and afternoons writing on the porch of the wooden cabin. I titled my notebook, "The Age of Freedom." I wrote about small moments, the wind in the treetops, the smell of morning coffee, the feeling of stepping onto a trail littered with dry leaves. The lines weren't fancy or philosophical, just the plain truth of a woman relearning how to love her life. I wrote, "When people say old age is the time to rest, I know they're mistaken. Old age isn't a period at the end of a sentence, it's a chance to rewrite the pages someone else once took from you." One evening, I video called my daughter Emily, who lives in Seattle. When the screen lit up, her mouth fell open, and then she beamed, "Oh my gosh, Mom, you look more radiant than ever. What did you do to your hair?" I laughed and touched my short, newly cut, slightly wavy silver hair glinting under the light. I just let the old part go. Makes my head feel lighter. You're really happy. Emily's voice tightened. I've never seen you like this. I smiled at the camera and said gently, maybe because this is the first time I'm living for myself, sweetheart. When I came home from Colorado, the whole neighborhood felt different. Betty, my dear neighbor, hurried over, eyes wide. Martha, have you heard? Aaron left Douglas. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yep. Word is he lost his board seat, and his investment outfit fell apart. Aaron said they weren't a match, and left with someone else. I just smiled, poured 2 cups of tea, and said softly, You reap what you sow, Betty. There was no venom in it. I didn't feel glee or anger anymore, only something close to pity, not for him, but for a person who thought power and deceit could replace happiness. After that, I joined Women of Renewal, a community of midlife women in Austin. We met weekly at the community center to share our stories: betrayed wives, widows, women leaving long, heavy marriages. I told my story not to boast about a victory, but to say this: freedom isn't given by others, it's something you choose. At one meeting, a new member, Sarah, in her 50s and still in tears over her broken marriage, asked me, Mrs. Martha, do you ever regret it? Leaving? The room went quiet. I looked around and saw their eyes hopeful, afraid. I smiled and tilted my head. I do. I regret not doing it sooner. The group burst into laughter, and applause filled the room. I laughed too, eyes wet but light. Not because I wanted applause, but because I knew those words were true. I got home at dusk. The sunset poured through the window, bathing the room in a soft amber glow. I poured a small glass of wine and stepped into the backyard. The lavender was in full bloom, the breeze carrying its gentle scent. I sat in the old wooden chair, watched the flowers sway, and added another line to the age of freedom. Freedom doesn't come from leaving someone, it comes when you're brave enough to return to yourself. The wind chime on the porch rang softly. Far off, the neighbors turned on their lights. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the cool air pass over me. 40 years of marriage falling apart didn't break me. It only made me see my worth more clearly. I'm no longer the woman who stirs soup in silence, no longer the shadow in a husband's. I'm Martha Lane, 65, a hobby painter, a gardener, and a woman writing a new chapter of her own. And if someone asks me, do you ever feel lonely? I'll smile, lift my glass toward the flaming sky, and answer, yes, but it's the most beautiful kind of loneliness because it belongs entirely to me. That afternoon, Texas felt as if the whole world were resting after a long journey. I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the sun drop behind the old oaks. The last light spread gold across the lavender as it bowed in the breeze. The wind chime tinkled, the smells of soil, flowers, and old wood braided into a familiar song. I realized peace isn't far away, it arrives when you stop chasing it. A light gust swept a few dry leaves across the porch, and in that breeze I heard Douglas's old line echo, "What is your age even good for, Martha? Make soup, keep a cat, don't dream about climbing mountains." I laughed no bitterness, no sting, just a gentle, knowing smile. "What is my age good for?" I whispered into the wind. "To start over, to be free, to love myself." I once thought 65 was the time to shrink, to settle, to count the seasons as flowers bloomed and died. Now I know 65 isn't an ending. It's the opening chapter of a new book, one I get to write, not anyone else. I looked around my home. Everything bore my touch, the paintings I made, the sheer white curtains lifting in the breeze, the plants I tended myself. What used to be his house is now my home. And I've become the woman I once dreamed of, peaceful, not waiting for permission to be happy. I remembered Santorini, the old dream that once brought me to tears. But today, I don't need white and blue roofs on the Mediterranean to feel alive. My peace is an evening cup of hot tea, the violet sweep of lavender beyond the porch, the laughter of the women of renewal on Friday mornings. I don't need to go far. Where I'm sitting is the Santorini of my own heart. Another breeze pulled me back to the present. I picked up The Age of Freedom from the side table, flipped to the last page, and wrote one final line in slow, steady script. I'm not afraid of time anymore. I know that when you dare to live honestly, any age can be the 20s of your soul. I set the pen down and watched the sunset deepen. The light touched my hair and returned a soft silver. I thought of the women listening to my story somewhere out there, maybe in a warm kitchen, maybe in a quiet room at day's end, wondering, is it too late for me to begin again? I wish I could look them in the eyes and say, no, it's never too late. If someone ever told you you're too old to dream, to love, to change, prove them wrong. Sometimes freedom arrives when you stop waiting for rescue and stand up on your own. I took a small sip of tea, the light sweetness spreading across my tongue. In the sky, orange gave way to deep blue, and the first stars began to blink. My heart felt full not because of the past, but because right now, in this moment, I am living for real. Softly, as a closing line to myself, at last, I have a life of my own. No longer somebody's wife, no longer someone's shadow. Just me, Martha Lane, the woman once called, too old to begin, beginning again in the best way I know. I looked to the horizon, then turned to the small camera on the table where I record these little talks. I smiled, my voice slow and warm, like speaking to an old friend. Thank you for listening to my story. I always want to know, where are you listening from? Texas, Florida, or halfway across the ocean? Leave me a comment and tell me. And if this story touched you, if you saw yourself in me, please hit like, subscribe, or share it, so other women can believe it's never too late to choose themselves. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, from Martha Lane. I shut off the camera but stayed put, listening as evening settled in. On the table, a small candle burned quietly, releasing a soft vanilla scent. I watched the flame tremble and smiled, whispering to myself, that's right, it's never too late. And in that candlelight, I saw clearly the woman I've become, not perfect, not young, but strong, gentle, and free. A woman who knows that sometimes the most beautiful light in life doesn't come from the sun, it comes from the little flame you lit for yourself.